Hello. Oh, you're still muted, Cliff.
How's that?
There we go.
Yes. Cliff, how about you?
Good. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep. Loud and clear. No jackhammer in the background.
Oh my goodness. You know, I usually come to the meeting from my apartment, so I'm on my laptop. I wouldn't cook dinner during a town council meeting or anything like that, but
A little more privacy and just in your own space.
I don't know why you wouldn't cook dinner during a town council meeting, to be honest, but I mean, a little early, I guess, 6 o'clock, but.
So
yeah,
we are live on YouTube, just as a reminder. I like to always open with that for all those folks watching.
Do you remember last time in August, Jen, did we have the jackhammer again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the first time we haven't. And it kind of goes in and out, to be honest. So, I mean, I can tell you're playing with it and you're trying to figure it out, but it somehow always sneaks back in there when I think you've got it.
Ouch.
So, yeah, I don't know it seems like some sort of feedback or something. That's the best I can suss out. Hi, Piper.
Hey, Piper.
So Cliff, just as far as running the meeting, I've got all documents up and I can do all of the sharing and everything.
Oh, cool. So if there's anything that we want to look at, I can.
Oh, I'm
just
sure there
ask
will be.
to
You
share
betcha.
it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you can just call on me if that works to do it like that. And
Okay.
yeah, it'll be a little slow in how I'm gonna do it because I have everything open and I don't wanna, I'll click in and out of documents just to, since I've got other stuff open on my computer at the same time.
Okay. You got any other tips and tricks for me today?
No, you'll do great.
I do not have a recording going.
Okay. I will make sure when we start this.
Wait, but before we do that, let's go crazy.
Right. Well, it's, yeah. There is a second backup via the YouTube actually that I figured out before, which is really nice if something happens with Zoom, but yeah.
Cool. Well, I will try to keep us on track and on time.
Okay.
And then I'm going to invite you all to just let me know if there's some required formalities that I'm overlooking. I think I would just as soon go by first names if that's okay with all of you.
To the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. Fine.
And council and everybody. Yeah, and vice versa.
If you would just turn to me during the agenda item where we have the Fair and Peers guys presenting on their research into parking utilization, I'll take 15 seconds to introduce them, and then they had like 25 slides and they've pared it down to 17. So they'll probably want to rip through that stuff and then leave 10 minutes or so to have a conversation and take questions. So
awesome. And then once we get past agenda item 7, the consent agenda, I just added it to my list. I'll also just make reference to the mayor's report that was provided a couple of days ago. And Piper, I'll just ask you to add that to the record. I don't think I need to read it or anything like that. Does that sound good?
That does sound good, yes. Thank
And
you.
it's been posted on the website as of yesterday. Piper did it.
Perfect. Yes.
Hey, John. Hey, Elise.
Hello, Cliff. Hello, Elise. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And Banjo.
Mhm.
And Jen, then after the mayor's report, should I turn to you for the dog licenses?
Yep. Thanks for that actual reminder. It wouldn't have taken me too long to find it, but I will make sure I have it up. Right there. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, what else? Anything else I'm overlooking that we need to do to get this thing organized?
I'm not sure if it's worth mentioning, but Margaret found a few errors in my treasurer's report, but bottom line, things are the same. It was just two coding errors. If you want to mention that.
Do you want to just, you can just jump in and mention that.
Yes, okay.
Like I
right.
said, well, I want to be informal. So when we get to the approval of the consent agenda, Piper,
Okay.
just, jump in, mention that.
Yes, thanks.
You guys like the new sculpture in front of the Alta Lodge?
Oh, I missed it.
I didn't
Oh,
see
it's a
it.
piece of performance art.
There's a new sculpture in front of the entrance to the town office too, and it's their broken truck.
Yeah,
I hope yours is better than ours.
yeah. It's a still life in broken truck. Hopefully it won't be a still life for very much longer.
They didn't look too happy this morning.
He's a good guy. You know, ask me again in a week, but I think
They'll be gone in a week.
you're right.
Me too.
Did you have a mishap in that project to sort of finish off the parking area between the entrance ramps, or?
Oh, we just got rolling on that yesterday. The mishap was just that his truck broke down in the Alta Central driveway.
I noticed that when I was like, taking it tight around the willows there on the way out of the office, the little parking area there, but
Well,
fortunately I was
thought you
going
were
the speed
talking
limit,
about-
so.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about that you had another one up in between your two ramps, but
Well,
Good.
we are moving ahead on that construction project. We have a couple of pieces of equipment in place there doing the project, and we seem to be making good progress. And then also Alta Ski Area is working on the upper slope of the Lodge Hill where the surface lift is, filling in the divot in the slope so they can open or doing a little summer grooming so they can open early season. That's pretty cool too.
Cool.
As a friend of mine said, it was paved paradise and put up a parking lot. I said, no, it's actually slightly improved an existing parking lot in paradise and add some paving to it.
we'll take that.
Hey, Margaret.
Hi, Cliff. Hi, all.
Hi.
So
Hello.
John,
Yes, ma'am.
did you print a bunch of materials for this thing and forget to take them?
Maybe.
I have some paper copies now I can refer to.
Oh, good. So I can refer to you for the paper copies I was going to refer to.
Right.
Just ask Jen, just
Okay,
ask,
test.
ask Jen to give us a screen share. All right, as Mayor Pro Tem, I call to order the work session of the Alta Town Council. And pursuant to Mayor Sondak August 25th, 2021 determination, this will be an electronic meeting without an anchor location. Hi, Polly. I invited our staff and also you to just jump in if I am overlooking any required formalities in the meeting today. I'm
Okay.
new.
I know you'll be great.
All right, well, let's start the work session and to begin by give ourselves the next half hour or so to talk about the business license study. You know, I'll try to come out of my shell and be a little more free in sharing my opinions. But to start us off, maybe we should turn to Jen and Polly.
Sounds good. So I do want to acknowledge that we have Susie Becker joining us today. She is with Zion's Bank, and Susie's been chatting with me about this study, and so she's informed, but it really was the work product of one of her coworkers, Erin Montgomery, who is on vacation this week. So you know, Susie's going to do her best, and I know she will. She's great because I've been speaking with her already today. But there may be some limitations to responses that she can give. So I just want to state that up front. And thanks, Susie, for joining us. I see you down there. Hopefully you're everything is working for you. So the last time the town did a business license study was 2013. And so what we're trying to do here is basically comply with state law and how we charge for business license fees. And this study is really to inform us of what the maximum fee is that we can charge. And so there are, you know, I know there's been some discussion about the previous study that was done. And so what I'd like to do is just on a very high level, point out that, you know, there are changes in technology over time. There's changes in expenses to the town. And so those are kind of some of the key reasons that you revise a business license study every 5 to 10 years, is to be able to get a fresh analysis of the cost to the town so that you can charge your patrons accordingly or your businesses. In this study, we did get a little bit more granular in reviewing some of the disproportionate call data. That was a big change that we had from the previous study. So I just want to point that out. And then what I was going to do really quickly is share my screen and just review some options that we have on the table today. They're not all options, of course, but they're 3 options that were pre-presented to the council for consideration. And then we can open the floor up, I guess, to questions from the council. Now, I do want to point out, I guess, too, that there were kind of 3 main documents that were submitted to you guys. We had 2021-06, which is an ordinance which enables the town to, if we decide to pass something that has a disproportionate fee included in it, we need to have this ordinance to protect us legally. So that ordinance contains as Exhibit A, the business license study itself as in draft form. And then also Exhibit B is a track changes version of the ordinance language, Title 3, Chapter 1. The 2021 R15 resolution that we may be talking about later is a repeal and replace resolution. And really this was kind of a suggestion from Polly, which is great because what it does is anytime a fee changes, instead of us just having to go into some master document and update a fee, is it's the whole schedule gets replaced each and every time. And it makes it much simpler for staff when we're tracking things. Now, in addition to the business license study fee being updated potentially in that resolution, there's also, we took the opportunity to reflect some dog license fee changes and some water rate fee changes, just so that we have one version that's complete. So those are the only other edits in that document itself. And then there was also the staff memo, which contained Appendix A, which are the 3 options that I am going to share now and briefly go over with you. And let's see here. I want this document. Okay. I believe you can all see my screen now. I have the wrong document up, but I will fix that here in just a second. Okay. And I'll see. Okay. So just to review, option A was what was presented in the August town council meeting. And the impetus for this scenario really was, in many of the categories here, the fee in this study is reduced from the previous study. So we have the maximum for those categories, which are basically all categories except for 1 and 8. And then we basically did the smallest increase we could to categories 1 and 8 in order to meet the goal established in the most recent budget that was passed of $18,000. So this is that scenario played out. Option B is a scenario in which the maximum fees were charged for all categories. And option C is a category where nobody pays any more than what they are currently paying. So for most categories outside 1 and 8, it's the same as in scenario 1, actually, and scenario B. But basically the fees for category 1 and 8 are at their current level that they are today. And so the town, what I want to point out in this is that the town council can choose a fee for a category that is less than what the maximum fee is. And things that we oftentimes will consider are, sales tax, revenue, in-kind contributions, things like that. And I think we've talked about that a little bit already. But I'll start us off there. And oops, I just scrolled up too far, sorry. And now I guess I would, Cliff, if you want, I don't know if you want to manage town council members' input or questions, but I can.
Oh, I don't think I could ever hope to manage the town council members' input and questions, but let me call for input from town council. Anybody?
I was going to say that I think that I'm supportive of adopting the ordinance that we need to adopt for that Jen was talking about earlier. I know there's a couple of them coming up, but the first one sounds like we need to adopt the disproportionate fees and the study itself and the draft of the study. As far as the fees go, I guess I would like to hear a little bit more from the ski area and I don't know, Cliff or the lodges. I mean, I know there's a lot of in-kind contributions that happen. And so I feel like that really needs to be weighed as far as the fee goes and the first application and second application. And then I mean, I think I've mentioned this in the last town council meeting, but I still feel kind of strong that, I mean, I know we got this $18,916 in our town budget, but I also, we're reducing some business license while there's 2 business licenses that are going up to kind of meet that 18,916. And in my mind, we should figure out what we want the fees to be, and then we will have to go back and amend the budget. I'm not sure, going the opposite direction in the beginning is the way to go, just because it doesn't seem quite fair that some of the business license will get reduced based on the study, and then there's 2 that go up quite a bit. So, and I said that the last town council meeting, but that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know what Mike Monton, if he's going to be talking a little bit about in-kind contributions to the town that the Skiria does. I know there's a lot of plowing, and there's some parking that was handed over recently. if we pass all the parking stuff, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I think that it can be considered in kind that can go towards the fees. And again, Cliff, I don't know if you or there's a lodge member out there that can, that the lodges talk about. I mean, besides the sales tax contribution, that is huge. Both of these businesses, category 1 and 8, make up the bulk of our sales tax revenue, which is basically what the town functions on. So that's another thing to consider when making fees, in my mind.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this, but it's not on behalf of the lodges. Even though I do work for one of the lodges, and that's a known and disclosed conflict of interest. I'm here just representing the town of Alta. And so I have a number of concerns about the study and the proposal, and definitely not going to be shy about sharing those with you, but it's not on behalf of the lodges.
So do we have any technical questions about the process or the procedure of and the methodology behind this study? That, because we have Susie available, she's not going to be able to join us for the regular part of the meeting if this conversation continues. So I want to make sure that we utilize time there effectively.
I have questions that are technical, philosophical, governmental, accounting, financial, so just to lay out my concerns. First of all, the statute authorizes recovery of disproportionate service costs and enhanced service costs. But on a philosophical and governmental level, I think public safety belongs to the entire community. But second, even if we wanted to do that, I've read the statute, and the statute refers to costs, and I am extremely skeptical of the idea that just by taking a big number
Seems we have lost Cliff. Oh, there you are.
You got me back?
Yes.
I'm skeptical of the idea that by taking a big number and dividing it into a bunch of little numbers that we've actually identified cost. Cost is cost, so that means something that you had to spend that you wouldn't have otherwise had to spend. So, for example, if the town had to purchase a snowplow in order to provide plowing services to specific businesses, and it was only for those businesses, I suppose I could see that being a cost, because it's something we could point to that the town had to expend that it otherwise would not have had to expend. But I don't think it cuts it just to say, because I can identify a small number of public safety calls and here's my overall budget, then therefore I can attribute that to a particular business type. No, I don't agree with that because it's not a marginal cost. So it's not a real cost. It's just a theoretical allocation. So that's my first point. I don't think we've seen any actual costs that have been identified that can be attributed, or if they exist, I certainly have an open mind, but they're not reflected in this report. I'm open to the possibility that there's a lot of homework that was done that wasn't shown as you try to read the report, but it's not in the report. So number one is I don't believe that there are any costs that are shown that can be attributed under the statute. Number two, I don't believe that a full accounting has been made of the indirect overhead costs that are attributed to that should be attributed to the licensing process. And as I shared with all of you separately, circulated the spreadsheet, and I'm certainly happy to have that made part of the record of this meeting. I believe that taking into account all of the overhead of the town, hey, all of the overhead supports all of the activities. That's what overhead is. And so by that, I'm not an accountant, so I'm certainly invite any study that would go deeper into this and correct it. But from what I can see, the total licensing cost per business license, including direct and indirect costs, is about $128 per business license. And I also think that if we just use our common sense and step back a little bit and look at what is being done and what is the licensing process, what does it mean to license a business, all of the activities that the town provides that support the licensure process, including public safety. 128 sounds like it's a lot closer to the mark than $62.
Are you wanting me to respond to that, Cliff?
No, no, I'm not. I'm sure I want to invite everybody to respond, but it wasn't a debating point. I mean, it's just simply the best that am able to glean from the material that's been provided. I would also point out that the renewal date on business licenses is October 31st. So we don't have to do something today. I like to get things done ahead of time. Don't like to do things at the last minute, but we have a little bit more time, and we can also come up with a process to have the fees paid at the time when they're determined. But we do have some time.
I will point out that staff needs processing time to prepare documents and things, and so we're at the last minute with this meeting as far as making any changes, unless we schedule a meeting. But the October meeting would be too late for processing for staff to make last minute changes and get applications out and all of those sort of changes. So, well,
I trust that we're all smart enough to get this done, even if the fees don't get paid until the month of October. I don't see that we are under the gun and oh my goodness, we have to do something today, or our carriage is going to turn into a pumpkin. But the other thing is, I'm sorry, I apologize, and Jen's done terrific work trying to shuttle back and forth to gain the information that we were able to gain from Zion's, but what we have before us today, it's just not a basis for action. I think it raises more questions than it answers. So the Zion report that's before us today, I don't believe there's a basis for action. I see that Mike Maury, you have a comment.
Yeah, you indicated you'd like, comments, from everybody, and I assume that means staff. So I guess my first comment is, I, for one, find that Zion's consistently acts with a high degree of professionalism and credibility. And I want to be real careful that at least our department doesn't say anything to undermine that statement. I would follow that up by saying, they can only react to the information that's given to them when, in determining these metrics. And as far as police activity goes, we were inhibited by the capabilities of the records management system that we had at the time. If you came to me, at a later date with this new system, we could give you different data. So I just want to make sure that at least from the police department side of things, nobody feels like we're poking at Zion's accuracy or credibility, because I do think they came to a valid conclusion based on data that we were able to provide to them. How you decide as a council to apply that, time will tell. I would, if I may, advise caution in applying maximum allowable fees solely based on this data. Police activity is highly variable, and it's not always a consequence of the nature of the business. Anything can happen anywhere, and we find that to frequently be true in Alta. So thank you.
Mike, when did you, you mentioned that you have a new system now that's a little bit better at tracking. When did that go into place?
We went live with it in the later part of June, as I remember.
Okay. I'm just wondering if there's, it's recommended that you get these studies done every I don't know if it's 3 or 5 years, but, maybe there's a way we could pass something based on the study that we have. And in another year or two, we can go back and redo this study with more accurate data that we have with our new record system. It's just a thought. We've already had the study done, and I know Polly has recommended that we adopt this study. So I'm just trying to find kind of a middle ground on where we can adopt the study, but also maybe, keep these fees a little lower until we can get the next study done with some more accurate information. It's just a thought. But I'm a little worried about not, acting on the study just because I know from Polly's email that she'd send out.
Susie, would it be, I was just going to call on you. I see you're raising your hand now. I was going to ask on a high level if it would be possible for you to just explain the procedure that Zion's takes in doing a study like this.
Yes. Yeah. So yes, those are great questions that you have raised, Cliff. And so I thought I would just address each one, given that I didn't do this, but I am looking at Aaron's spreadsheets while he is off at the beach. So hopefully I will get this somewhat accurate for you. But Utah law allows, so let's talk about the disproportionate first, and then we'll go to the indirects, okay? So for the police, and thank you for your comments there. Any on the police, but so it allows for disproportionate costs to be charged to businesses, either by type or in locations or by some means that require a higher level of services than the base amount. And then, of course, the law does not define what the base level is, but most communities, every community I know of in the state, has used the base amount as the number of calls to a 1 ERU, a residential type unit. Okay, so I'm just going to use an example. If a residence had 1 police call per year, I know that's high, but we're just easy to do in our heads. And a business grouping of certain type of businesses had 3 calls per year, they would have 2 calls, it'd be disproportionate. So you would take those two calls and you could multiply it by the cost per call to come up with the disproportionate amount. So then the question becomes, there's two parts to this analysis. First is how many calls are disproportionate by a business grouping. And the second is, what is the cost per call? So for the case of police, so I look here at the spreadsheet, your budget, we're going to round numbers, was about $1 million. Okay. And based on some great research, it looks like that was done by the town marshal, we can only use the percent of that budget that is used to respond to calls for service, not for patrols, not for basic services, just for that disproportionate part. And we had 2.08% of the time the budget was spent on 911 calls. Okay. With 175 calls per town dispatch, that comes up with a cost per call of $119. So to answer the question on the police disproportionate, question one, that is how that was calculated. So if there are any questions there, and I'll move on to the indirect question.
I have a question about that, if I may.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for your excellent feedback and for the council's suggestions and concerns, some of which I concur with, others I have critiques of, but we'll discuss. Can you describe more fully that 2.08% just being, so how we can only charge as a municipality for disproportionate calls only being 911 calls? I missed that point.
Well, you could charge, so there's really two parts of the disproportionate cost. If you're going, one is the regulatory and one is the responding to a call. So yes, if you're going into a business and perhaps it has a liquor license or it's a pawn shop or something, and so your police are going there more often to inspect, yes, you can charge for that time as well. But the other part that is considered to be disproportionate is responding to calls. But just patrolling, things like that are not generally considered and it's just an interpretation of the law. But in the other attorneys we've worked with, other communities, that's generally how it's been interpreted, is it's just those calls and those increased inspections.
And so Susie, in our report, we didn't look at the regulatory costs. We only looked at the call data because that was information that we were able to
right. And if you charge for those regulatory inspections, you better do them.
Yeah. Can I just say it's part of my job today, only today, to keep us on time. So I'm going to extend this conversation about the business license study until 3:35. But then we're going to have to stop at 3:35 because we have a couple of other agenda items to cover in the work session. So I'd like to give everybody who wants to speak and has substantive input the chance to talk in the next 7 minutes or so.
Susie, I think you were going to hit on the overhead next.
Okay, I just didn't know if
That would be good to hear from you.
wanted to speak.
Yeah.
Yes. So indirects, usually we'll take your budget and we will identify those categories where we feel that there are some indirect costs that could be allocated to the process of business licensing. It is hard to say that something like the court really is involved in any way with the process of business licensing, or the C road funds are involved with the process of business licensing, or building inspection, or post office. So those categories were eliminated, and we used those categories that were felt to be most overlapping, such as legislative, or municipal, because we do have business license fee laws, municipal, the building is part of the building. So some of those types, those budgets were included. Their first share is indirect cost to build up the cost that would increase the cost on this through indirects. So that's how that was done.
Thank you. That was very helpful, Susie.
Is there any reason that administrative wasn't included in the overhead?
Yeah, Cliff, that's a good question. And Jen and I talked about it. And so we could maybe get a couple dollars more out of it, but we cannot take the entire administrative budget and put it in because all of our direct costs are coming out of the administrative already. And so if we take that whole cost and say, oh, that whole budget for that department, and then say, oh, it's all indirect too. Oh, but we already counted it as direct costs.
So
for
I
almost
did
a
the
handling.
math on that, Susie, and the number of double counting is $5,932. So you would just subtract that from the admin, but it's basically a rounding error. That's the direct cost is $5,900. So you could subtract that out of the admin.
Well, you've got to be a little careful. If you use that methodology for one department and take out the direct costs for that department, but then you're going to put in all the direct costs that administration spends with police or with the IT folks or other departments, then you haven't done apples to apples for the business licensing department. So if we were to take out all of the direct costs out of administrative and then say, okay, 10% of it's left as indirect costs, then we were really only getting a couple dollars more added onto the fee to get us to about $64. The other one we played with.
Actually, like 95% of it would be left. So when you take out the direct costs, all you're subtracting is $5,900. So it's a rounding error. It's a tiny sliver of the overhead.
Yeah, I think you're taking out just the direct costs for business licensing there, right? Yeah, so my point was if you're going to take out the direct costs for business licensing, then let's be consistent with that budget, the administrative budget for the other departments. And let's take out the direct costs for all of the other departments, because if we take all that's left, because there's going to be direct and indirect in there. There's going to be direct costs where administrative has with police, that they have with planning and zoning. And so why should business licensing then have to pay a portion of those direct costs from those departments?
Because to answer your question, it's all been subtracted. There's nothing left to subtract. Once you subtract the direct, it's $5,900. You've subtracted it all. There's nothing left to subtract.
Okay, I'm not explaining it very well. We maybe need to do it sometime, Cliff, when you're not going to do it on a piece of paper or on a spreadsheet. But if you take the administrative budget, and I'm going to make this up, let's just say that 5% of their time is spent with business licensing. Let's say that 20% is spent with police. Let's say that 20% is spent with planning and zoning, all the way down until we have about 10% of time that's spent over all the departments together, staff meetings like this, workshop, city council, training, that type of thing. That's the amount of indirect then that we really could allocate amongst all the departments. But all of the other amounts would from administrative would be allocated directly to each department. So it would leave a fairly little amount. I think we came up with 50,000 when we were just playing with it.
Well, my view of overhead is overhead. The overhead is the overhead of the entire organization, and all of the organizational overhead supports all of the organizational activities of the organization. I would be, I know that I've been told about the reputation of Zions and all of the studies that Zions has produced for business licenses. I would be happy to, drink out of a fire hose of information. The report's only 16 pages long. It doesn't give us any information about the theory of allocating overhead. I had to work that out on my own. I would imagine that if you're producing dozens of these studies, you could devote 10 pages to the correct accounting methodology of how overhead should be allocated, but there's nothing about that in this report.
Sure, and it can have, we have it here in the spreadsheet. I'm looking at what he's done, but I can certainly have him, have Aaron, when he gets back, drop in more. I'm happy sometime to just walk you through the spreadsheet as well, or have Aaron do that when he gets back, of how that's being calculated. But I think I've sort of tried, tried to explain it that we generally, just really quickly, we're out of time, right? 1 minute. We have got this, you've got all your different line items in your budget. We got about 15 of them here, okay? Or more. And then we picked the categories we thought were most appropriate. Legislative, municipal building, non-departmental. And then administrative is the one that we're talking about now. We let the others go because, like I said before, we didn't see any reason why the C road funds or the summer program or the library had anything to do with business licenses, okay? But in administrative, what we're saying is, well, maybe you could get a couple dollars more out of it if you really wanted to squeeze. That's really all we said, because all of your, that's the department that's covering business license fees. Your direct costs are coming out of that department. It's different than the other departments. We're taking the direct costs out of there. Okay. And so we can't use that entire budget. And even subtracting that part out, you're spending a lot of that direct time then, because we've taken their direct out. We've got to be consistent. We have to take out the police department's direct costs, planning and zoning, all of those from administrative, and say what is left that is truly overhead, that is not directly attributable to one department, and it's a fairly small number.
Thank you, Susie.
All right. Thank you so much, Susie Becker, for joining us, and really appreciate your sharing the information with us. Before we move on, are there any other members of the town council or staff who'd like to be heard from during this part of the work session?
Just very swiftly, if I might ask the question, if we give credence to the idea that this is a flawed but sound study, and we understand that we need to lower costs as much as possible based on the methodology of this study, I'm not really sure why we wouldn't charge the maximum cost at the same time. Doing so still is a drop in the bucket in relation to what those costs are meant to offset. And it seems to me that there are a number of externalities that businesses in town benefit from that are paid for by and large from many other sources. The study gives us a firm grounding in what we can look towards next time we actually commission this. But going forward, these fees are not anywhere near in line with the actual costs of the services that the municipality at our town provides. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you all so much. Let's move on to the capital project plan. And Chris, I'm sorry to take from your time, but let me turn it over to you, please.
Okay. Jen, were you gonna share a document or?
I can if you'd like.
Okay, I can do it too. But, go for it. So yeah. You may recall that we intended to get this out of the way at the last meeting. And, you know, given that there's a good amount of money in the capital projects fund and a number of projects on the capital projects plan, and that we didn't write the agenda correctly last time to provide the notice we needed to take action to approve the plan, we thought we would just provide a few minutes here during the work session for the council to ask questions about the capital projects plan, the capital projects accounts, the process we followed to develop the plan, et cetera. So I don't have a ton to say about the plan or the process that I didn't describe in the staff report. You know, basically we have to have a plan in place that's approved by the council that essentially allocates funds. Jen, you're writing an email.
I just see that. I was going to say thank you Susie, for joining us.
I'm sure you have a number of screens, but
I was trying to not do that. So
happens to the best of us.
Thank you.
That was a good email. Yeah. So yeah, the council has to approve the allocation of funding towards a list of specific projects annually. You know, a number of these projects we've seen on previous year's capital projects plans. Some of them are now urgent, particularly some of the Marshall's Department technology projects. Some of them are less urgent, but still need to be implemented when time allows. And some of them are a little bit longer term. So with that, I would just ask for any questions that the council has about the capital projects plan.
Thank you, Chris. I think it's terrific. I read it all. I also read the mayor's take on it as well. And I don't have any questions on it, so I would yield the rest of my time to fellow council members and staff.
I did have a couple questions. One, I've noted for several years, the current number 15, the community center rear yard geotechnical. We've never had a date established for that. And it seems to me that that is a safety issue, that with erosion and other things in that back wall, that that's something that maybe should have a date put in there of FY 22 or 23 in order to protect the community center, where we do have important, we've got marshals who are living in there during the time period that they're in town, and the library and the post office and so on. So I am wondering why we don't have a date in there, and whether or not we could suggest a date on that particular item number.
That is a good question, Margaret. The reason why that project is as vague as it is that I have not, neither I on my own nor in consultation with the people we usually turn to try to understand what our needs are with regard to a specific problem with the building, or need to acquire some piece of technology, et cetera. We haven't been able to figure out exactly what to do there. I'm not so, and that is like a weakness, that is a shortcoming that we have when it comes to executing capital projects, larger kind of construction projects on our building. So, lately we've been focused on trying to understand how to implement a phone system for the marshal's office, really for both the out the central and town office buildings. That's been our priority for a big capital expense, before the snow flies. And so this, you're right that it is important. It is a safety issue, and we need to get some expert advice on what the project ought to be to reinforce the hillside back there.
Is that expert advice something that could be done in a phased way, such that we initially say, would you please take a look at this and tell us what we should be considering, and then thereafter seek proposals for the construction itself, since it is something that likely requires an expert and not, I use this in air quotes, just staff. You guys are fully capable, but you're not geotechnical experts. And so maybe engaging somebody for an initial look-see is the first step.
Yes, it certainly is. And that's how we go about, that's how organizations go about, doing projects like this. You identify the type of contractor who would provide the services, and, ask them how to go about seeking bids. What does this entail at a high level? And then, you get a formal estimate, and then you get a couple more formal estimates. So, yeah, we're going to get to this project. So perhaps we ought to put an FY 2023 entry in this column here for that project. It's not something that we're going to complete this year. And it's probably not something we complete before July 1st of next year. So.
And
Could numbers and, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, I was going to move to a different number, so I'll let you go ahead, Sheridan.
Okay, I want to hear from all council members, but I'd also like to remind you that we only have 15 minutes left in our work session to talk about what is by far the most important and pressing subject that we have before us today.
Just real briefly, I was hoping to see numbers about what it would take to revitalize our town park. And I don't see that as part of capital projects or haven't yet to hear back about that. So just kind of an outstanding circling back issue.
Yeah, and I appreciate you bringing that up. You know, we don't have, I know that the swing set is something the community's expressed interest in seeing, deployed once again. I think we know amongst the four of us in the office what it would take to set the swing set back up. I mean, when you say revitalize the town park, I don't know what other elements of a project there might be. So if there are specific recommendations for what we could do to revitalize or enhance the park, we'd be open to those for sure.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions at this point on the capital project plan?
If I may, Mayor Pro Tem, this document is easy to update. So, as recommendations for projects are passed along to us, or as we identify new projects, I mean, we just update it and take it back to you and you approve it. And
yeah, that's right. And we would never use the term slush fund, especially not in Alta. But we do have some funds at the bottom of the document that can be allocated in other ways.
Sure thing. Yeah.
All right. Let's turn to implementation of permit parking. And Chris, do you want to lead us off on that?
I believe that the real expert, Alta Marshal Mike Morey, just availed himself. So I'd like to turn it over to him if he doesn't mind.
Sure, we'll give it a go. I realize we're on a very short clock. I'll try and go fast and be thorough. Number one, big thanks to our legal team for getting this product done in a really short amount of time. And I think it's a good product. The reason that this conversation on a new ordinance is before you today is this is really the fundamental building block for us to go into a fee permit system. The shortest way to explain it is we've got to have a legal reason to be there. So without an enabling ordinance describing the environment that we could operate in, we can't do any of this. So Chris, I'm hoping that maybe you could put the draft ordinance up on the screen.
Sure. Just a moment.
While we're doing that, I want to let the council know this is certainly not going to be the last piece of legislative product we throw at you here in the near future. This is a component of it. This is a first step. We're also going to have to address, the approval of fees if this ordinance is passed. What the decision-making authority is on setting those fees and the allocations is probably a conversation Margaret wants to have today. And we're going to have a much larger conversation down the road about taking our ordinance over to a civil penalty type system as opposed to a criminal penalty type system. That's maybe best a conversation for another day, but there are some legal problems involved with the way that we presently do business. We can't be arresting cars. We need to have some legislative finding that the registered owner is the person responsible for the violation. And this ordinance does actually address that. Polly or Cameron, do you want to jump in at all on our intent in constructing the ordinance here?
I'll let Cameron jump in since he really had the bigger hand at drafting this. If there are questions, I know time is very limited, so I guess we should just, maybe it's better to just let, if council has questions about it, respond.
Sure, and I'm good with that too. So what we're attempting to accomplish here is to get an addition to our parking code, which I think is usually 5.4 something. So this would extend it into Title VI, which would allow us to designate permit areas and the use for the permit areas, for example, overnight permits within the areas of the town where we have a jurisdictional or control ability to do it. The proposed ordinance goes on to talk about some penalties for fraudulent acts in obtaining a permit. This ordinance proposes that a fee schedule has to be approved by the town council. And in going through and constructing this, we really looked at, what are our legal boundaries? So what is something that absolutely requires a town council approval versus something that could be done on an administrative level? And so that's where you're going to see the language about a permit distribution system being approved by the mayor, with a lot of administrative input given by the staff. I know that Margaret and I will try and give you some time, maybe wants to talk about town council involvement in that. I will say that as a building block to getting our parking plan going, this is key for us to continue with our arrangement with the Alta Ski Lift Company to have management controls over the lands in their special use permit area that they've offered us to use. So without that in place, it's my expectation we will not get management control over those lands. And the effect of that would be that we only have 2 parking areas where the town would have any say so about overnight or day use parking, and that would be the north side of Flagstaff and the north side of 210 between the community center and the Snow Pine. It's fair to say that those areas are already full, and if that's all we can go forward with, we're going to have a fairly major problem. And
Yep. And I think, speaking for all of us, we recognize the gravity and the urgency of taking action today. And from my standpoint, it's our top priority to get this accomplished today with whatever minor amendments the council may see fit.
yeah, and bear in mind, as we move into the regular council meeting and you consider action on this, you're also going to be, seeing a presentation from Fair and Pierce, with a range of options on permit distribution formulas.
I just want to say good job, Mike. I know this is this is tough. I mean, I know I'm not been involved in any of the ski area parking discussions, but I've overheard them, and there's many meetings, and I can only imagine that you've had many meetings. And I don't have any problem with passing this today. So I just wanted to get that out there that I'm good to go.
I think there's probably some proposed language cleanup that we might see in the regular portion of the meeting.
Yep, may have some minor revisions in the regular meeting. Nothing too big.
So since there's a couple minutes left and there doesn't seem to be a lot of immediate questions, I do want to point out that we've got some heavy major tasks that we're going to be working on in the next 30 days. And those include executing a memorandum of understanding between us and the ski area, which is going to require some Forest Service oversight, acquiring a special use permit from the Forest Service to collect fees on National Forest Service lands, construction of passage of this ordinance and others contract agreements with the parking vendor. I want you all to know that we did put out an RFP for somebody to manage permit issuing and enforcement on a civil basis. We only had one response to that, and that was Interstate Parking, the same company that is going to be representing the Alta ski lifts. There's some great benefits that I perceive in that scenario where we can now possibly create a single source of information on how to park and survive at Alta. They come prepackaged with a lot of things that we need, like a appeals authority to meet our legal requirements. And so we're excited at the prospect of moving forward with Interstate rapidly. Our parking model continues to be that we only see that we'll have management controls of the north side of the highway from roughly the shallow shaft to the eastern edge of current Grizzly Gulch overnight parking. And that is going to be to accommodate all the overnight parking needs of the community and the commuting workforce. Would love to see a scenario where we have some space left over for other users, where we could do a daily permit fee matching what the ski area does. I'm not optimistic that we're going to have that kind of real estate available. We're looking at some other areas in town, like the roadside parking on the south side, west of the Deep Powder House, for additional commuting workforce employees, and if the situation allows, maybe some daytime public parking. The only way we get through this is with a cooperative agreement between us and the ski area, under the oversight of the Forest Service. And let me be clear that we are not taking public parking away. We're organizing it different than how it's been in the past. Any member of the public will be able to use the ski area's parking, but they will be required to do it in a different manner at certain times. I think the good news is our overnight parking is going to look a lot the same that it has in the past. Hopefully, working with the lodges and the prospect of those spots costing money, people will find an incentive to store their car in other places, which would be one of our goals as well.
All right, thank you so much. We will return to the subject of public parking and the proposed ordinance during the regular town council meeting. I want to recognize and express my gratitude to all the incredible hard work on the part of Marshall Mike Morey, Chris Colley, Polly, your office, everybody else who's contributed so much hard work up to this point. And you've earned the privilege to do a lot more hard work in the next couple of months to get this thing up and going. So I'm going to call a close to the work session. We'll give us a couple-minute break, and we will resume with the town council meeting at 4 o'clock. Hey Piper, hey Polly. Do I need to read this declaration?
No,
Sweet.
yeah, you just have to,
Refer to it.
you don't have to do anything, really. It's
Okay.
part of the agenda, so you can just forge ahead, actually.
All right. We'll wait a few more moments. All right. Call to order meeting of Alpha Town Council. And the declaration concerning holding this meeting as an electronic meeting without an anchor location is already on the record. So I believe that the first order of business is citizen input.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself really quickly. Piper, I didn't see anything come through written. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you for verifying that. And then I have one person I'm going to check with on the call. Jake Minnis, did you have, I didn't hear back from you. Did you want to make a public comment today? You're enabled to speak.
No, thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much. Just wanted to check with you. So Cliff, we are no public comment.
Okay, great.
I've checked with everybody else on the call.
Okay, as I said before, I've invited our legal counsel and staff to correct me if I get out of line with any of the formalities that we need to do in the meeting today. But with that, let's go ahead and use our time for the important business that we've got on the agenda today. Let's see, I'd like to call on Mike Mon from Alta Ski Area. If you're ready to talk with us, Mike.
Mike should be with us.
Had to click all the.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there's a bunch.
Buttons, that's there. I realize you have a lot on your agenda, so I don't have a lot today. We're wrapping up our summer operations here. We've shut down our Alta Eats for the season and the campground store. The fee booth will stay in place on weekends, probably I think October 12th is what we're looking for. We're wrapping up our projects on the mountain. The Nina Shush project's all done except for the revegetation that we're doing. We're wrapping up the powder cache expansion up on the mountain. And other than that, we just have a few little we're doing some work on the rock wall up by Alf's. We need to do a little cleanup here, work at the Albion base, but we're kind of wrapping up. We are waiting for helicopters to fly at our avalanche fence and the Vicent towers. They're all off fighting fires right now. So that is a little challenge that we have going on. But other than that, the other thing we're really focused on is just trying to get this parking system honed in. So we're still working forward on that. But that's all I really have, unless you have questions for us.
I just had one question, Mike, and it seems like there's dirt going both up the summer road and down the summer road. I don't know if it's the same dirt that's going up and down or what's going on.
It's so we're up at the Secret Lake Trailhead Bend parking lot. There's when the old Supreme Lift was taken out, a lot of the fill material was just spread out, and we made a parking area. The parking area was a little larger than the Forest Service had approved, and there's some wetland mitigation that we're going to be doing there. So we've been removing about a third of that parking lot. The material that's there, it's not suitable for anywhere else on the mountain. So that's been going out. And then we've had some fill going up, some more topsoil type stuff for some other revegetation type products. So you're all right. It's been going both directions a little bit. That should be ending here. I don't know that we'll have any of that after today or tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Mike Mon?
Cliff, am I interrupting council members?
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Mike Mon had raised his hand during the work session when we were talking about the business license fee, and I don't know if he wanted to share a comment with us now during this agenda item.
Sure.
On that.
I was just going to ask the person from Zion's, how do they deal with these business fees analysis when you're somewhere in a place where you have all this public land, which people are coming to recreate in, and they're really recreating on the public land. Is there a distinction between that and businesses per se? Just curious of how that would be evaluated in other places, because it's really the national forest they're recreating in. They just happen to be that when there's an issue, they go into whatever adjacent place there is to make a phone call for assistance. But they're gone, so I can't ask that question.
I've got it noted.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. Next on the agenda is Unified Fire Authority, Jay Torgerson. Jay, are you with us?
Yes, I am here. Let me turn on my video. Good afternoon. So in the essence of time, I'll try to be short as well. Unified Fire is in the process of our recruitment efforts. It seems like we're always in the process of our recruitment, but we just finished all of our exam testing and interview process for potential new hires. We had over 700 people sign up to take our entry-level testing. We moved 90 people forward in that process, interviewed those over the last week, and now are moving forward with the process of eventually hiring 25 to 35 new firefighters sometime in February. So it's a long process for us to get everyone through that, to vet them, to put them through background investigations and that sort of thing before we make job offers. We do have a number of our personnel that are currently on wildland fire deployments in California right now, and then various others that are in states just to the north of us. We have had continual requests from those task forces that go to California. Once they finish, they're usually there for 14 days of work with a travel day on the front and a travel day on the end. And right when they're getting to the end of that, we get another request. So California is continually requesting help from the state of Utah. And so it's several departments that put together forces to go out there and respond. But as I've told you in the past, that brings experience back to us that we're able to utilize here at home. Since we met last, I think we had the Parley's Canyon fire, which was at the very top of Parley's Canyon, that you all probably saw and familiar with. We were very concerned about that dropping over into the Summit Park area. But aircraft were utilized very quickly on that as a response to Unified Fire being there and managing that incident right off the bat and being able to get aircraft and to contain that fire really quickly. So you don't use aircraft to put fire out, you use it to contain a fire. So the lines that they were able to put in were able to contain that fire quickly and keep it from moving into the Summit Park area, which I think Polly's probably very, very glad about.
Thank you. You guys saved our house. So.
Well, it was a lot of coordinated efforts from not just the personnel that we have, but keeping it manageable to a point where you bring in a management team that specializes in wildland fire. So that was the management team that came in with Forest Service folks, as well as Unified Fire, BLM, people from the state as well. So a big group of people working on that. Again, we're monitoring and watching COVID numbers increase in our areas, and have developed protocols and policies for our own personnel to be able to deal with that. Again, we're encouraging all of our personnel to become vaccinated, as well as the general public to become vaccinated in order to try to keep a handle on things. We have not moved forward with requiring vaccinations. We do have most of our personnel have been vaccinated, about 85%. But if someone chooses not to become back or be vaccinated, we require them to wear masks while they're at work. We require all of our personnel to wear masks when they're out indoors in the public in order to try to avoid the spread of that further. As far as your call volume for this quarter to date, so 7/1 to today, September 8th, you've had 11 total calls in the town of Alta that UFA has been involved with. 2 of them were fire calls and 9 of them were medical calls. Any questions for me? All right, thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Really quick question, Chief.
Yes.
Sorry to. So the Parley's fire brought to mind sort of the worst case scenarios that could happen in Little Cottonwood for us. And I had a brief conversation with Chris Colley about this. And I'm wondering if there is very little time, let's say we cannot evacuate by road and cannot be helicoptered out, is the best option to always go to like a cement building? Would it be trying to go to like the Cliff or Our Lady, or like what kind of scenarios do you want to think about? And then real quickly too, what are the best things to have in a go bag, if I can trouble you for that?
So first of all, as far as where to go to stay safe, I think in Little Cottonwood, an open area for sure. If you had to be outside of a structure, if you were inside of a structure, I mean, we often would say if we get to the point where we feel like we need to evacuate, you'll follow the guidance that you would get through a reverse 911 process through Central or through VEC. We would be working in cooperation with Marshall Morey and his staff to help facilitate that, and would, based on where the fire was and what the conditions were, we would either recommend either sheltering in place like you do under avalanche conditions, or moving to a safe open area. So the gold miners parking lot, or to the Cliff Lodge, or like you said, a non-combustible building like Our Lady of the Snows or something like that would be suggested. So it depends on what the fire is doing, what the conditions were, and those would help us make those recommendations. As far as a to-go bag, you don't want to have it be so much that it's difficult to get loaded and be able to get out quickly. Just the important documents that you would need as far as identification, obviously, important documents like passports, any kind of bank statements or investment statements that would be important to you, that if lost would be difficult to replicate. I mean, a lot of that stuff is accessible online, so it wouldn't necessarily be something that you would have to take. But those documents that are irreplaceable, so driver's license, passports, and then any of those things that are important to individuals personally. So if you have photo albums or things that are not replaceable, that would be other things that we would recommend taking. Medications, obviously, that you would need to sustain yourself for a few days would also be important to have available and ready to go. Hopefully that answers the question. I've talked with Chris, and there's some flyers and recommendations that we have more or less to prepare for wildland fire for property, and how to make your properties more defensible. Those flyers are available, and we've sent those to Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else for me? All right, you made it through the busy summer. I was up in Alta on Monday, and man, it was busy. So hopefully you get a little bit of breathing room here before the ski season starts.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Jay. We'll see you soon. All right. Let me suggest that we turn to discussion and possible action to adopt Ordinance 2021-07 regarding implementation of permit parking. I can, Mike and Chris, we can call for a motion. We can, and then go into discussion. We can have a little more lead in, or if you think it's useful, we could also flip the discussion to hear from you all, from Fair and Peers, and our legal counsel to lead us into it, whatever you all think is the most productive.
So maybe the best thing to do is, if the council's comfortable with it, the ordinance is kind of an overreaching, not overreaching, but a framework, not overreaching, but it's just a over breadth framework to allow for a particular parking program to be put in place. And it does some, very required things, such as Marshall Morey mentioned, making it so that he can ticket cars as opposed to people. And it allows for whatever specifics the council wants to have, but it's the overall framework. So maybe it would be, if the council's comfortable with it, if we could just move forward with the ordinance first, and then we can have these other discussions, which we are anticipating won't be resolved today, but at least start that discussion.
Okay, that
I'm
sounds great.
comfortable with that.
Terrific. Is there a motion?
I move that the town council adopt ordinance 2021-07.
Seconded.
All right. I'm going to move an amendment to that motion with some additional language. Margaret, you and I were in touch this morning about just some very slight amendments, and I can either offer my amending language, or if you are comfortable with that amending language that I had sent on to you, you can offer it all in one amendment. It's your call.
Thank you, Cliff. I think I would prefer it be done in two portions. So I move to amend ordinance 2021-07, and I sent language that I was looking to amend the ordinance with to Chris and Mike Morey, and to each of the council members present today. So if Chris could pull up that document, I can share it with you, but part of it is in the preamble, or the whereas section. I'm changing the verb tense from promoting to promote, and then incorporating that we're looking to look at the health and welfare of the people of the municipality rather than just the municipality itself in that second whereas. In the following whereas, the third, I would insert, or suggest we insert, parking demands. And then on the next page, and this is something that I think, in discussion with Mike Morey and also with Chris, the question about whether or not we insert the word jurisdictional in front of the word control, and that their comment was that might be a legal question for Polly or Cameron. So the motion would be to amend it in putting in jurisdictional, and then we can discuss whether that should take place. And then the last thing that I had there was related to 6311. And this was not an amendment, so I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I just wanted the legislative history to include that the discretion we're talking about in terms of unlawful activity penalties, at the discretion of the town, whether it's a civil or criminal penalty, would include the marshal's office as well, rather than somehow administratively outside of the marshals. If that is clear what my motion is.
All right, so there's a motion to amend. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Any discussion?
Okay, I can jump in on the jurisdictional. I'm trying to move it. I think that language I think it's just clear that it's within the, I guess, Margaret, what are you trying to clarify by adding in jurisdictional? Because to me, it just makes it a little bit, if it's within the control of the town of Alta, it's not a huge difference. I just don't know. To me, it just having added words maybe makes it more confusing, but
If it's appropriate, I think Cameron might have had a question or a reaction to that word change.
Yeah, if I could just interject on this, we actually had the language originally as jurisdiction, but it's the jurisdiction refers to the legal control, and that's not always the case necessarily. The town has jurisdictional control over the boundaries of the town, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have control over everything that happens in that town. And so some of the parking here is going to be the result potentially of a contract agreement. And so that's not necessarily going to give the town legal jurisdiction. It's going to give them control of that by a contract. And so that's why we changed that from jurisdiction to control.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, a contract would give the town legal control, but I understand what you're saying. You're saying jurisdictional is a geographic boundary issue rather than a legal authority to act. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, for example, if the town contracted to have parking in an area that was either within or outside the town, they would not have jurisdiction over that area, for example, for criminal citations. And so jurisdiction of an area is not the same as control. Jurisdictional in the legal sense is, does the town have the legal ability to have jurisdiction there? And that is different than whether or not they have control over an area.
Is there any reason that we didn't just draft this to say the parking area consists of any public property within the town of Alta?
Yeah, because I think the question there is what's the public property and parking within the town, because that changes depending on the area.
Well, and you could look at the ski area's rights to exercise authority over public property that they lease. So it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I think that's another reason we said control, because that control is essentially going to be ceded to us, we hope, by a written agreement.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we can be a little pragmatic in the way that we do this. Margaret, did you want to amend your motion to amend?
Precisely. Yes. Thank you, Cliff. So I want to amend my motion to amend, deleting jurisdictional from section 6.3.4, and the rest of the provisions from my amendment remain.
Okay. And I'll take a second to, I'll hear a second to the amended motion to amend.
I will second.
All right, any further discussion on the motion to amend?
Could I just ask, because I didn't get to see these until just now. Could you scroll down? I thought there was one other one that I just thought that, oh, the AMO. I didn't know if Cameron wanted to speak to that.
It's not a suggestion to amend as much as I just wanted to, that in our legislative history, that we are, by saying town discretion, we're including the marshal's office. So I'm not suggesting that be put into the ordinance.
Right.
And to answer your question on that, the marshal's office would be included within the language of the town's discretion. So the marshal's office is part of the town and could make that determination.
And potentially also the contract parking vendor, if we delegate that authority to them acting as our agent.
Correct.
All right, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so the amendment passes, and we're back to the original motion. I would like to amend the motion. There was some discussion in the mayor's report that was forwarded to town council, whether what degree of participation should the town council have in the mayor's role in allocating permits. And Chris or Jen, I wonder if you could scroll down to 6.3.6. Sub 1, yeah, right there. And so this is the issue that Mayor Sondak had raised, was just simply like, well, do you want me to do this? Do you want to do it? How do you guys want to do this? And, you know, to my mind, the right way to do it is to give the mayor the discretion to take action, so we're not waiting around from meeting to meeting, but at the same time, there should be an advice and consent process where at the next scheduled meeting, the town council can come back around and develop a consensus on anything that the council as a whole believes needs to be done under sub 1, so that's not purely at the discretion of the mayor. So if I can, and I mean that literally, if I can, let me share my screen and see if I can. It says this will stop other screen sharing. Wow, that's drastic. Okay, so here's what we're looking at, and this is what I would suggest, which is here under permit parking, ordinance 6.3.6 sub 1 is to, I'm not sure if I need to, there we go. My motion is to add in the underlined language under that section to give the town council the opportunity to look at it and change it if it sees fit at the next town council meeting. So that's my motion, and I would ask for a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Cliff, you and I have had this exchange over email, but for the benefit of the other council members, that was a subject that I brought up with Mike Morey in conversations that I had with him yesterday. And I'm persuaded by what Mike said, that this is a system that needs to be fleet on its feet, that has to be agile. And even putting in that the council would review and revise it and approve it at the next council meeting. As you noted earlier, we as a council do not necessarily act even quickly at a next council meeting. And so to put in provision that say, this is what's going to happen, is that we will reach a consensus at the next council meeting, potentially sets us up for failure, or potentially a meeting that goes on until a consensus is reached, which I think is not what we want to have happen. So I agree that it would be good for the council to look at it, but I wouldn't want to hamstring us that it has to be at the next council meeting, because I also see that the system, because it's brand new, we've never done it before, we may have to keep going over this month after month. There may be changes that are happening all the time. There may need to be meetings in between meetings. And so I would like the flexibility to be there for the staff who are going to be completely involved to be able to work with the mayor, come up with a system that makes sense.
Okay, thank you for that input. And in order to address that, we've got the language here that says that the mayor's approval shall take effect immediately. So there's no delay when the mayor acts. And then in order to address, I think, another point that you're raising there, Margaret, is that this would be subject to approval by the town council meeting at its next following meeting and subsequent meetings. So we have immediate effect, and also the ability for the town council to undertake its appropriate role of review of the action that has taken. With that, with your indulgence, I will amend my motion to amend to reflect the current language that's on the screen. And I would again call for a second.
I can second that. So I guess, sorry, just kind of the way I envisioned this, and I think we are going to have to be very fluid with this process. I mean, this whole parking thing is going to be so new for us, the mayor, the staff. And so I just want to say that the way I envision this starting out is that the mayor approves permits and they're effective immediately. And maybe there's some sort of document, maybe it could be part of the consent agenda, where that list of, I don't know if it needs to be like, we don't have to go over that list every single town council meeting, because that seems very time consuming, but it could be part of a packet that is emailed to us. We can approve it as part of the consent agenda, or if we have discussion, we can discuss it. And maybe we find that process is too simple, or maybe we find that we need to do it further down the road. But whatever we do, I think it just needs to be fluid. This is something that's going to, maybe change month to month as we get better at this. And we may need to improve on some things. We may find some things. So I'm fine going over it and reviewing it as a council, but I don't want to spend, 20 minutes every meeting going over parking permits. I think that's just not effective way of our time. So I was just suggesting maybe it could be part of a emailed packet to us, like the consent agenda, or something that we could review ahead of time and get kind of figured out before the meeting starts.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also to keep in mind, the context here is, if you can see my screen, we're just talking about the number of permits available and the manner for allocating permits. We're not getting down in the weeds, and I don't think the mayor is going to want to get down into the weeds like we currently have to under the dog licenses. So this is just to give the mayor the flexibility and, as we've said, the agility, and yet not to make it a decision that can't be reviewed by the town council. I'm sorry, Polly, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. You know, it's a little confusing because I guess there are two different functions happening, right? Generally, the council is the legislative function. The mayor is generally more of an administrative executive function. And Cameron can pipe in as well. But this was drafted in a way just because the mayor typically does the administrative function. But that doesn't mean that the council couldn't change this. To me, as I'm listening, it makes me a little nervous because it's like if the mayor makes one decision about the number of permits and then the council at the next meeting says, no, there shouldn't be 200 permits, there should only be 100 permits, that's going to create some chaos. I think my understanding of how the program is going to happen, and also maybe Marshall Morey can pipe in a little bit too, is that you're going to pass a resolution basically with the program itself. And so I think that some of these details will also be part of that resolution, so the council can have that ability of that oversight. So I don't know kind of what the best process is, but I think it would be better to put in one body's hand or the other, because otherwise you're to go back and forth is going to create legal issues for the town. I don't know if Marshall Morey wants to jump in and kind of what we're thinking, or Chris, about kind of how, I mean, I think the idea was that we're not picking those numbers now, but maybe this should be happening by resolution. I don't know if they are going to change throughout the winter. You know, I understand. I think we were allocating that to the mayor's function because we wanted to be able to respond quickly if needed to be. But if the council isn't comfortable with that, then we should just pick one body to make those decisions.
I'm sorry, I have to jump in here because I did not understand Cliff's move to amend the amendment. I've got his amendment, but can you tell me exactly how you're amending your original amendment, Cliff?
Yeah, the motion to amend that's before the council right now is what I'm sharing on my screen.
Right, so you're not amending your amendment.
Yeah, I did because I added.
And subsequent meetings. Okay,
language.
Thank you.
Mike Morey?
Well, it's been said already, but I'll say it again. You know, this is new. We're sure that we're gonna, on day 2 of this, encounter something that we hadn't contemplated and have to react pretty rapidly to it. So would like to maintain the ability to do that. I think it's right and proper for the council to have, you know, an oversight interest in it. I don't know what the appropriate wording is, but I would think that, you know, as a matter of new business, the council could bring up, you know, proposed changes at any time.
And if I could jump in just briefly here, I think Polly and Marshall Morey said this well, but I just wanted to sort of simplify it. The amendment that you're proposing is already within the council's authority. So if 636 subpart 1 were to pass the way it was proposed, the council could change that ordinance at any time. They would just have to go through that process. I think the difficulty here is if the mayor passes a number of permits or the manner that they're allocated with the language that you're proposing, the council then could change or revise that completely. And so how is the public supposed to have notice and understand what those are when it can change at every meeting? And so I think it creates I think it creates complexity where it doesn't need to, and the council already has the ability to change this. And so there's no, it's not necessary to put it into the statute or the code rather.
Yeah, I think initially, oh, sorry, Mike.
Oh, I was gonna just, maybe fast forward a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, you all are gonna see, some proposed scenarios on allocation formulas. And hopefully after that presentation, we're gonna be able to hear from you all and we'll have a pretty strong sense of the direction that you favor.
All right. Well, I have listened carefully to all those comments, and I still believe that it's important for the town council to retain its role of review and revision within the context of this process of allocating permits. Unless there's any further discussion, let's do some democracy. Let's call the
Cliff, I need
question.
the second for your amended amendment.
Elise seconded that.
Okay.
My additional comment was just to reiterate, Cliff, what Polly said initially, that this ordinance, and I think the word she was trying to reach for was an overarching program that this ordinance is setting up. And I think with that framework, the amendment to your amendment that you're proposing would not be necessary, in my opinion, because it is setting up an overarching program that resolutions will address, that the council specifically has authority to handle.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for that input. Let's call the question. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
All those opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, so the vote is 2-2, and so the motion to amend fails. And is there any further discussion before we call the question on the pending motion to enact the ordinance as amended?
I just think it's important that we remember the spirit of the amendment that you've offered here, Cliff, which I think it is implied perhaps with the entire ordinance, and yet sometimes is forgotten. So I appreciate that you brought this forward, and I think we need to keep that in mind as legislators.
Well, thanks. I think if Mayor Sondak were here, we might have passed that motion to amend. But the sun will come up tomorrow, and I think our town's going to be okay. Any further discussion on the motion to adopt the ordinance? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
4 in favor, none opposed, and the motion passes. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Any further discussion before we move on to the Fair and Piers parking study? All right, let's do that.
Are we moving on to the Fair and Piers parking study?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks all for taking action on that. That was a good step. Last month you met Chris Bender from Fair and Piers. I don't know if you met John Gard, but John Gard has been Chris's primary sidekick from the Fair and Piers office on helping us take the steps we've taken so far on their scope of work to help us research parking utilization in town, understand kind of the sandbox we're playing in terms of creating a program in partnership with all the entities we work with up in town. And they have quite a bit of information to work through in a batch of slides. I think if it's going to be okay for Chris Bender to share his screen, that would be the easiest way for this presentation to go off. And I think Chris has between like 15 and 20 minutes of presentation to give. And I believe his preference would be to just work through it and take questions afterwards. I think we have a half hour in the agenda, so that should leave a good deal of time after Chris is done for you all to ask questions about what he's about to show you. So without further ado, Chris, why don't you take it away?
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris. Just one fix with Zoom. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So hi all, my name's Chris Bender, as Chris mentioned. I'm a transportation engineer at Fair & Piers. With me also is John Gard, the principal in charge of this project at F&P. Thanks for inviting us back to Town Council. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Town of Alta parking plan. Just to give a heads up, as Chris mentioned, this presentation is intended to be information seeking and not necessarily action seeking. We've developed a few parking plan options, one of which we feel is more effective than the others, but we would still value input from the council, which would help guide some of our final steps in preparing the final bits of this parking plan. Also, we mentioned this in the last meeting, but we feel it's worth repeating. The purpose of this plan isn't to take away parking from anyone, but rather the purpose is to maintain the parking that's already there. The Alta ski area's paid parking plan, which is important to the continued operation of the ski lifts, is variable and also driving the way, and also driving the need for a Town of Alta parking plan. In other words, without a parking plan, there will be no way to preserve the historic parking throughout Alta. One last point, we do have quite a bit to cover, as Chris mentioned, and a short time to cover it all. So please hold questions until the end. Each slide has a page number. Each slide after this one has a page number, so feel free to jot down your questions and notes. Note which slide your question pertains to so we can come back to it at the end. So since last month, we've been very busy gathering data and preparing this parking plan. During today's presentation, we have two objectives. First, we're going to briefly review the parking survey that was circulated to gather parking data. And then we're going to outline potential parking plan options as well as our recommendation for which one's most effective. In the week before our previous meeting, Fair & Piers worked with the Town of Alta staff to develop a parking survey, which was sent out to lodges, businesses, residents, and short-term rental companies in Alta. This survey asked about historical parking patterns and other factors that might affect future parking demand throughout the Town of Alta during peak winter parking seasons. Here are a few important bits of background info, beginning with the current parking supply. In short, the Town of Alta has just over 2,200 parking spaces typically available to use by the public. The map here shows that the town is proposed to manage the parking along the north side of SR 210, which includes approximately 259 parking spaces. Another 1,951 spaces are proposed to be managed by the ski area. These quantities are likely to fluctuate with the snow during the winter, and we were very recently briefed that another portion of the ski area managed parking spaces may be handed over to the town to manage. But for the purpose of this presentation, these are the foundational numbers that we're referencing. Based on the results of the survey and fact-finding efforts from the Town of Alta staff, we understand that the main parking demand generated for parking within the town and ski area managed parking lots include approximately 37 cabins and private residences, 323 total lodge rooms, 7 local businesses, 3 short-term rental companies, and the Alta ski area itself. Just to clarify, the lodges here referenced include the Alta Lodge, the Peruvian, the Rustler, the Snowpine, and Gold Miner's Daughter. Notably, 100% of all surveyed local businesses and lodges responded to the survey, and 86% of all cabin owners responded as well. Altogether, we have a sample size of 57 total responses to learn from. This bar chart here reflects that, and from left to right, the reported parking demand throughout weekdays, weekends, and holidays. It shows parking demand during the weekdays, weekends, and holidays during different times of the day. As shown here, holidays were shown to have the highest parking demand during all time periods, including weekdays, weekends, and holidays. The peak parking demand was observed to occur on afternoons between noon and 4 p.m. In addition to when the peak periods occur, from the data we gathered, a few other trends were immediately apparent. Specifically, some respondents appeared to treat the survey as a statement of desired parking supply as opposed to what they would actually use during a typical ski winter. For example, if I own a cabin, I may have reported that I need 3 spots all winter long, even if I only need 1 parking space of my own. But guests may come over on some weekends that will like their own parking space. This graph demonstrates that tendency, since the surveyed weekday parking demand was nearly equal to weekend and holiday parking demand, which we understand to not be the actual case. Due to this tendency, and for the purpose of this analysis, Fair and Peers is analyzing the peak parking demand on weekday afternoons from noon to 4. This slide outlines some of the key findings from the survey. The first finding was that all private property parking was reported to be full during parking periods on weekends and holidays. Second, parking demand within town managed areas was reported to exceed supply by about 18%. More specifically, the demand was reported to be 305 total spaces, when in actuality only 259 spaces exist in town managed areas. It should be noted, however, that the situation actually may be more dire than that, depending on factors presented later in this presentation. Third, in the past, approximately 93 parking stalls.
Chris, could you excuse me for a moment, please? Because of the screen share and the way the view works, I wonder if there's any way that you could make the display image of the parking survey maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe that way we could see, like, can't necessarily see the right side of the pie graph there.
Cliff, maybe I can see it pretty well. Do you want to maximize your?
I can see it too.
Yeah, you might.
I can see it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe maximize the window you're viewing that in, or something like that. Reduce the resolution on your screen, perhaps.
Okay, cool. Excuse the interruption. Please go ahead, Chris.
That's totally fine. We're good to go. Okay. So the third conclusion that we drew from the survey responses was that 93 parking stalls in the ski area have been used by residents, lodges, and local businesses. The chart here shows that the public parking demand in the parking areas, the chart here shows the parking demand in public parking areas by type. Notably, lodge parking required over half of all parking to be used or being used in public parking areas. The ski area also requires an additional 20% just for employee and service vehicle use before recreational guest parking is accounted for. So in this pie chart, it should be noted, there are no skiers in this. Since the lodge parking was reported to account for just over half of all parking demand, we wanted to take a look a little bit more intently at those uses, specifically, as I mentioned before, the Alto Lodge, the Peruvian, the Gold Miner's Daughter Lodge, the Wrestler Lodge, and the Snowpine Lodge. Notably, the Alto Peruvian Lodge actually has a substantial amount of their own on-site parking, which accounts for all of their parking demand throughout the winter. So these bullets really only reflect the public parking demand of those other 4 lodges. At each of these lodges, over 100% of on-site parking was reported to be used. In addition to the 150 parked vehicles throughout the town of Alta, another 44 were reported to park in the ski area. So that means there's a total of 194 parking stalls of demand that account for 373 fully occupied guest rooms and 348 on-site lodge employees during a typical ski season workday. This means that parking demand comes out to be less than 1 space per guest room. That demand is even lower per guest room after employee parking is considered. And based on the results of the survey, it appears that lodge guests have historically been one of the better groups to divert to transit modes rather than to get to and from Alta, and so have one of the lower parking demands. Taking this a step further, therefore, the travel demand management efforts would be most beneficial when directed toward reducing the amount of parking used by lodge employees. Sorry, let me take a step back. Those travel demand management efforts are going to continue to be looked at during the next phase of this project. So with all of that in mind, our first critical question for the council that we'll come back to after the presentation is over. The question is, how much will lodge parking continue to be provided in the ski area? We asked question 1 because if vehicles that have historically parked in the ski area are now displaced to town managed areas, that would increase parking demand to 35% over capacity. More specifically, 349 of spaces of demand compared to 259 spaces of capacity. We also have two other critical questions that follow the results of the survey. Question 2 is about the effective parking supply, which is the total supply left over for the public after non-compliant parking has been accounted for. An example of that would be someone who chooses to park without making a reservation, even though they're likely to get a ticket. Our question to the council is, by how much should the effective parking supply be reduced to account for those who purposely do not comply with the permit system? In past conversations with Chris and Mike, we've estimated about a 5% non-compliance rate, though getting the town council's input would be valuable here. Regarding question number 3, the town land use parking demand within the ski area is 94 spaces from noon to 4 p.m. on a holiday. If those spaces are instead buying for parking in town parking, demand now exceeds capacity by 55% total. So that brings us to 401 spaces out of 259 of capacity, 401 demand versus 259 capacity. So to what degree will skiers who reserve parking early at Alta, the ski area, put town land uses at a disadvantage from securing those spaces? So with all of that survey data in hand, we worked with the Alta City staff to develop a series of parking plan options, one of which we recommend would be more effective over the others. When developing parking plan options, we understand that each of these user groups identified, cabin owners, employees, skiers, and non-ski area visitors, have different parking habits and needs. So in considering a parking plan, we kept these 4 user groups' parking experience in mind. Option 1 is similar to a do-nothing option, where the only change to Alta's parking is that it would require a fee to purchase a parking permit, but no limitations would be placed on the number of permits that a user could purchase. Options 2A and 2B are both centered around limiting the number of overall permits that could be purchased, either with some measure of overbooking, like on an airplane, or not. Option 3 builds on that, but also includes a progressive pricing structure to provide additional incentives to reduce parking use in town managed areas. Now we're going to go through some of the pros and cons for each of those plans. Option 1, being the unrestricted parking permits option, would have no restrictions placed on who could purchase a permit, how many could be sold to the public and business owners, and things like that. This is the simplest option and provides equal access to all who choose to purchase a permit. It would likely work well during non-peak periods, like weekdays and overnight. However, it should be noted that this is also the only scenario where all parking stalls would be continually maximized. However, with that freedom and maximized parking, an option to purchase an unlimited number of permits, we run into the same issues that we already have. That is, parking spaces are never really guaranteed, especially during peak winter parking demand periods. Also, that illegal parking will likely occur even with a permit structure, and that unnecessary travel on SR 210 will continue to occur as has been observed in the past. To be clear, we do not consider this to be a viable parking plan, but we want to present it to provide a holistic understanding of the paths moving forward. Option 2A would restrict parking permits in such a way that a portion of the town parking supply would be set aside for seasonal permit users, and another portion would be set aside for single day permit users. In this option, the total number of permits available to be issued on a single day would be some percent greater than the total supply. For this example, we threw out a number 20% for the overbooking rate of the highest demand days. But that percentage isn't set in stone and can be adjusted moving forward. The benefits of this option are that parking space uncertainty is reduced compared to the unlimited option and present day conditions. Though peak parking periods on holidays will still be a challenge. Outside of those highest demand periods, however, this option would work well and reduce the number of wasted parking spaces not being used. The disadvantages of this option are that the process to divvy up permits would likely be contentious, and also that overbooking parking permits may result in a parking shortage during the highest demand days of the year. Option 2B would further restrict the total number of parking permits so that the total number of permits able to be issued on a single day would be no greater than the total supply, 259 spaces. This option provides the greatest level of parking space certainty, although illegal parking may still cause issues. In this option, the process to divvy up permits will almost certainly be contentious and may result in nobody getting all of the parking that they want or need. Additionally, underutilized parking on weekdays and many weekends will likely lead to frustration among those who would have visited the town but were unable to do so, unable to obtain a permit due to lack of available supply. Option 3 seeks to provide a context-specific permit system to meet the anticipated needs and demands from various land uses. In this option, parking permits would have a progressive pricing structure. This means that the first vehicle for a land use would cost a certain amount, the second would cost more than the first, and the third would cost more than the second, and so on. The goal of this structure is to provide opportunity to all to purchase some parking, but discourage users from reserving more than they actually need. The main advantage of this option is that it provides an informed, need-based, context-specific approach to allocating permits. The main disadvantage is that some users who would like to reserve more parking may feel it's unfair. This is the option that Fair and Peers recommends would be more effective at regulating parking supply, more effective than the previous versions presented here. And so with all that, any questions?
Where do I get my permit?
Permits would be regulated through the same system that the ski area is managing them, and that is through interstate parking. As we understand, they're the parking vendor that the town has selected.
Sorry, Chris, I was being facetious and felt like you needed a curveball.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Keeping me on my toes, keeping me awake.
Have you come up with your preferred option in light of what you believe the Alta Ski Lift Company's parking situation will play out?
So based on the possible options moving forward, we recommend that this option 3, would be the most effective at providing parking for those that need it, while also optimizing the parking supply. We don't want to have a whole bunch of parking spaces sit empty when they're needed, but we also don't want to give a ton of parking spaces to people that aren't going to use it. Or rather, we don't want to give a bunch of parking permits to people and then have everyone show up at the same day, and then people are sent home. So this instance, we feel, would provide incentives to regulate parking and divert some people who would typically drive up and park to transit or other means. And so this is the option that we feel is going to be the most effective one. If that answers your question.
What kind of process do you go through now to fill in the blanks on the dollar amounts of the permits, and how do season passes for residents tie into that?
Season passes as in seasonal parking passes, you mean?
Yes.
Maybe I can jump in. Cliff, here's where it gets tricky. We know, and the numbers just validated it, that the bulk of our available parking is consumed by live-in lodge employees who want to have a car close to where they work in case they need it. Most of the time, those cars don't go anywhere. They're covered, they're just lumps of snow alongside of the road. We can price them out of doing that at perhaps a tremendous impact to the available workforce in the town of Alta, which I personally believe is part of our lifeblood. We can instead try and give the employees a break and say, hey, you're really valuable. And so it's only going to be, $25 for a season overnight parking pass. And then we have probably no change whatsoever. So we've got to get together as staff and make a recommendation to the mayor, working with Fair and Pierce on an equitable number. We haven't arrived at that yet. And then we have to have the same conversation about, our resident property owners. We've looked at communities where they really put the fees heavier on the workforce and less so on the residents. We haven't, I don't think, found a model where the residents are charged, more than, an employee seasonal permit. But, it's been very difficult to find a parking situation just like Alta's. So we're going to be spending some time starting tomorrow down in the weeds with this and making some recommendations to the mayor and the council. And to underscore Chris Bender's comment, yeah, people aren't going to like it. And we're not going to be able to do this by ourselves just through permits and fees. This is going to require every single entity within the town of Alta doing some planning of their own, organizing employee carpools, looking at rideshare vans, which perhaps we can offer at a discounted permit rate. We don't have alternate long-term parking options to us, but perhaps some of the employers have employees that have RV pads at their homes that would be willing to make a deal with the lodge for to meet some of these, this demand, so that we can free up some more space, because we know going into this, we've got a huge supply and demand problem. And at the end of the day, we can't give what we don't have.
Yeah, and I've said this before, Mike, and now I'm gonna speak for just a moment here in my role as a business manager. I love our employees. Yes, they are our lifeblood. At the same time, for well over 20 years, they've had 5 months unpaid vehicle storage, that has contributed a lot to our parking problem. And that's not sustainable going forward. That's got to change. So that's the end of my comments today as a business manager.
Well, and it will be beyond helpful for us in our next steps to walk away from today's meeting with an understanding of, a preferred council direction.
When you all talk, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said, Mike.
Oh, I wish I could remember it because it sounded kind of smart. No, I think I said something like it'll be beyond helpful for us as we go into our next steps to come away from this meeting with some idea of what you as a council would like us to see in terms of direction here.
Can I make a comment? I'll just point out that we did go back and forth on 6.3.6 subpart 1 about who determines the number of permits available and manner for allocating permits. But later in the ordinance, the council, in order to establish a fee schedule for this, that will require council action. So there was a question earlier about how we go from into the next steps of determining a fee structure, and we will come up with some recommendations, but then that will require council action probably at the next meeting or a special meeting about parking. So anticipate that.
And when you all assessed illegal parking, were you thinking of parking that happens sort of wall to wall on the bypass road? Will that be considered illegal parking or free for all?
As as far as illegal parking, for the purposes of this presentation was considered, that's just anyone parking within the town of Alta parking limits that doesn't have a permit to be there.
And to specifically go at your question, Sheridan, we fully expect that once Alta Ski Lifts and the town do our thing, people will start looking for ways to cheat or game the system. So we're concerned about roadside parking on the bypass and the lack of UDOT signage. We're working with UDOT to come up with ways to provide better signing while still maintaining an ability to plow. We're doubly freaked out about the same thing happening in the Superior Hellgate section of the road where we've got the avalanche issue to contend with. And I'm sure our neighbors to the west that also operate a ski area will feel some impact from this.
I'm just recalling watching as I was walking Griff, watching you explain to someone who'd triple parked someone in on the bypass road why that wasn't a good idea, and being very impressed with your people skills, Mike.
Thanks. We're going to have those kind of problems for sure.
Well, in terms of trying to present helpful information for staff going forward, it seems to me that the presentation that Farron Pierce has just given us both supports what I anecdotally experience and understand and have understood from Mike for quite some time. And as Mike has said to me a couple times, we have no good options, and so we're having to choose between the best of the difficult or worst, trying to avoid the worst options. So from that information, it seems to me that option 3 is preferable to the others that are presented. And so I guess that's the direction that I would encourage staff to go following this meeting today.
I concur.
Oh, go ahead.
I concur.
To build on that comment from Margaret, and also on Cliff Curry's, too many Chris's, on Cliff Curry's question from earlier, Farron Pierce would value any input the council has on that progressive pricing structure. What that would look like, what that would seem to be, what would be most reasonable from the council's perspective for the first parked vehicle, the second parked vehicle, and so on. And that can be broken down by land use as well. If we want to set a pricing structure for cabins and residences, and then give lodges a little bit of a break since they're going to probably need like dozens of spaces or what have you. We'd like to hear your perspective on all of that.
I was saying that I definitely support option 3. My worry is finding the balance between giving some of those cabin owners a third or second spot when maybe another cabin owner doesn't get one, or balancing it with parking we need for our workforce. And so I do know that talking to some of the cabin owners up in Grizzly Gulch, for example, that they rent their cabins out and there can be potentially up to 3 or 4 cars on a weekend for some of those cabins. And so I just want to make sure we find a balance between, I get that we're going to try to charge more money for that second and third car, but in my mind, this isn't quite about making money. This is more about making sure we have a balanced system that works for our residents and our workforce to keep our sales tax revenue coming in and everything that we need to keep the town functioning. So that was my only input, is that we find some sort of way to, I just don't want to see a cabin owner have 3 parking permits because they're willing to pay the money, and then some of our workforce doesn't get a parking spot, or some other cabin owner doesn't get a parking spot because a cabin paid money to have 3. So that's my only concern about option 3, but it's of the options, it's definitely the one I support the most.
Yeah, that's a great point, Elise. Absolutely, it's not about making money, it's about applying some incentives. But some people are more sensitive to the economic incentives than other people. And we don't want to make a system that lets somebody just buy themselves into whatever they want. And so with the economic incentive-based system in place, there still needs to be a regulatory check on it.
Well, simply put, we need to find out at what point do we say no.
Sorry, what was that, Mike?
At some point, we need to decide where the line gets drawn, and we say no. We're sorry, there's not a permit available for this.
Yeah.
Now, we are interested in working more with Interstate. They've got some neat technology by use of codes that can be issued to entities where maybe multiple vehicles could be registered under the same code for a permit, but only 2 could be active at any given time. So we're interested to find out more about their capabilities there.
All right. Well, I don't want to cut off discussion, but we still have a lot of work to do today. I think this is a super compelling presentation and excellent work by our team of town staff and Fair and Peers. So thank you so much for the presentation. And I think we've built a preliminary consensus and we have a basis to move forward, and got a huge mountain to climb ahead of us for the next couple months.
We'll be back in touch.
Sounds good. Chris, Mike, we'll see you at our weekly meeting. Everyone else, thanks for having us. We're glad to be able to be here and present to you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, unless there's any matters that I'm overlooking, let's move ahead to approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Haha, I'll second.
Okay. Discussion.
I think the only thing was the potential amendment to the treasurer's report. Piper, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I'd like to say that Margaret caught a few errors there. I would encourage you to pass it as is. There are no bottom line differences. It was just a coding error inside a department. So I would ask you to approve the treasurer's report as submitted, and those changes have been made. So Margaret has seen what the changes are, but they're really just moving a number up one line or down one line. So.
Okay, terrific. And then we'll see the right numbers next month as well.
Yeah.
Further discussion. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda is approved. Let me bring in just briefly here. The mayor's report was provided by Mayor Sondak to members of council a couple of days ago, and I'll ask the clerk to include that in the minutes of the meeting. And then Jen, can I turn to you for dog licenses?
You may. Temporary dog licenses issued with a start date between August 6th and September 6th, 2021 include the following. Penny Heatley for 14 days starting on August 16th. Trisha Petzold, 14 days starting on August 18th. Scott Lomley for 5 days on August 19th. John Fay for 14 days starting on August 27th. Ginny Marie Linus, 3 days starting on September 4th. Sarah Goodson for 30 days starting on September 6th. And Tally Goodson for 30 days starting on September 6th. And that's it.
Terrific, thanks. Are there questions about the departmental reports? I'm not hearing any. Let's move on to discussion and possible action to adopt resolution 2021 R14, opposition to the Olympics in Little Cottonwood Canyon. Let's see, this was it's brought forward by Mayor Sondak. First I'll ask, is there a member of the staff who wants to make any discussion of this? Then we'll go from there to entertain a motion.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just as a little background, we did this before in the late 90s, before the 2002 Olympics, and it was entirely based on public safety. The narrowness and steepness of the canyon, the possibility of severe weather events and avalanches, and it's just too tight of a place for, tens of thousands of extra people to be up spectating Olympic events. All of those things are still the same. We have the same public safety concerns. However, now the mayor was worried, we're looking at 2030 or 2035. And by that time, I should go back a little bit. All of the venues are still in the Salt Lake area and are still being used and been kept up. But with the potential of climate change, places like the downhill might not work in Snow Basin anymore. So there'll be more of a pressure to maybe put some events up Little Cottonwood Canyon. That on top of any changes to the transportation access to Little Cottonwood, whether it's extra bus lanes or the gondola, it just might be an easy knee-jerk reaction to say, well, we can do this in Alta or Snowbird or somewhere in Little Cottonwood Canyon much easier now. So talking with the mayor, the concerns were all of the public safety issues are still there. We still have the weather. We still have the possibility of getting trapped. We still have the avalanches. So just for public safety reasons, we would hope that they would not have any Olympic venues in Little Cottonwood Canyon. On the other hand, we strongly support the Salt Lake Olympic Organizing Committee and the Utah people in seeking the Olympics. We just don't think this is the best canyon to have any events. So with that as a little intro, any questions?
My question, John and staff, is not related to athletic events themselves. I wholly concur with that. It's more that should there be a torch relay or something like that, would this prohibit the ability of something of that scale and magnitude from being able to take place in the canyon? And might that be something that we would not want to prohibit?
That's a very good question. And we talked about this. We wanted like no Olympic events, award ceremonies. We didn't talk about the torch relay so much. But if you don't feel that, if you're in support of this and you don't feel that no Olympic events, that could be seen as an Olympic event. If you would like to strengthen that language and add something more specific, that would be perfect.
Yeah, I agree that having an opening or closing ceremony or awards ceremony or athletic events, absolutely. But my thought was some sort of a torch relay. It would be involving many fewer people, potentially a camera crew, maybe even not, but that would be something that maybe would be acceptable in the town, wouldn't provide additional congestion or traffic. Or the significant safety issues that the others would. So that was the only thought. So whether we would modify it to say no athletic events, but something like a torch relay could be held, or we wouldn't object to that. But I don't know what other people think.
I can almost hear Elise's wheels spinning, but you're muted.
Oh, I mean, I'm just trying to, we're talking about 12 years from now or 8 years from now. And actually there's a typo on the resolution. You have an extra 0 in the 2030. At least the one that was emailed to me.
That's way out. We don't have to worry.
That one's way out.
20,000.
But I guess
Thank
my
you.
only thing is I agree with Margaret. I mean, I think there could be something that could be, I don't want to exclude everything. But I also don't know what the road's going to be like in 12 years. I mean, we could have a very different road. So I guess I'm just worried that we're kind of restricting ourselves to something that's not going to happen for 12 years or 8 years. And this is kind of the first time I've really heard about it, when we got our meeting materials. So I haven't really had a lot of time to think about this resolution. It kind of just, we got this last week. I haven't heard Harris talk about it or in the past. So I'm not really sure where I'm at on this yet.
Okay, well, I don't think it's urgent, especially since it's 2030. I don't think it's urgent that we do this today, but if you want to mull it over, it is, we did even have it in our general plan in 1992 for the 2002 Olympics. We took it out. We had this no Olympic venues should be in Little Cottonwood Canyon. We took it out after the Olympics were held, but so we have some time to think about this.
Well, I think from my understanding, part of the reason why it was being proposed now was in relation to that EIS, the Little Cottonwood EIS. And so just making, although I think there is plenty of time, I think the thought process behind it was just to, as that's moving forward, to make sure that no matter what happens with the Little Cottonwood Road, that Little Cottonwood Canyon Road, that we aren't inundated with visitors with those impacts.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is the least urgent matter on the agenda today. And it'll also be good to hear from Mayor Sondak, and then also if there's some offline discussion, maybe there'll be some language that will be put into the draft resolution that would address the question of a torch relay or something like that. So based on that, I'm going to make a motion to continue this matter to the next month's agenda. Is there a second to that?
I will second.
Any discussion?
Just agree with Elise and with Margaret that there might be some nuances to this that we want to consider. I don't think a little more time in relation to even the EIS will hurt us if it goes to the next council.
Yeah, agree. And I think Mayor Sondak's an excellent voice to hear from on this too. Makes sense to me too. Any further discussion?
Well, I don't disagree with any of that, except that we do have in the mayor's memo that he sent to us his comments about this particular provision. But again, I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's been said that it had to be done today. So.
All right. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
None opposed? That motion carries. It's continued to the next meeting. Discussion and possible adoption of capital projects plan. Chris, can we turn back to you for this?
Sure. Yeah. The capital projects plan is for you, and consistent with the way we've done it in the past. You can approve the capital projects plan just by a simple motion. Unless there's further discussion on the capital projects plan, I think it would be appropriate for council member to just offer a simple motion to approve it.
Is there, maybe I didn't print it out in my packet, but is there a resolution in front of us, and I throw this out to as a question to anyone who wants to jump in.
There's not a
answer it.
resolution. It's not necessary. It's just a vote to approve it.
And so the proper form of action would be there'd be a motion to approve the capital projects.
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
I have a discussion question about it, and that was, again, the question about potentially putting in a date for number 15 that we mentioned briefly in the work session for the geotechnical work that we discussed, and also regarding the 15,000 that is allocated for number 16, the audio video system. I know that John Byrne has done a lot of work in that area for other entities, and he might be a good resource for the town to look to as a way of potentially finding us a better financial basis for that, potentially something cheaper. So I wanted to just make sure that if we have this information from a consultant that it's 15,000 for the audio video, that we're not necessarily committing to a contract for that if we can find something cheaper.
Yeah, so we have been talking about improving the audiovisual system in the community center for a little while. We tried to find a way to make an investment, a modest investment, at the end of last fiscal year with some funds, some leftover funds, but we reached out to a contractor that builds audiovisual systems for meeting spaces, et cetera. And just with the sort of functionality that we requested they provide, that is roughly the amount that they came back with. So, I mean, with an expense of that size, we'll have to get bids anyways. So we'll just have to find some other audiovisual contractors and see what they would propose. I mean, if John Byrne has some ideas for local vendors who build systems for clients, then yeah, I should reach out to him. And with
I would say that one of the reasons that it's seems high is we would need equipment to facilitate live streaming, a better system to stream meetings in the morning. Sorry, in the future. So when we get back to that point.
Yeah. And with the backside of the community center, I think it's reasonable to assume we'll try to move forward with a project in fiscal year 23, since we don't have much project time left in fiscal year 22 at this point. So.
And just generally as a framework, you budget money, but you can always, if you're less than that amount, you would reallocate the money elsewhere or adjust your budget overall. But just because you're allocating it, if you can find it cheaper, that's great. And that's what you do.
Certainly.
And then again, the last item, sorry to keep being here, but the last item, number 20, in terms of the community center, and Cliff's comment about the slush fund, which this is not. The question that I have just procedurally to understand, when things are in the capital projects plan, it's not that we are necessarily allocating that particular amount, as Polly has just said, or that it's necessarily for that particular project. It could be moved from there into the general fund for some other purpose, that we have to move things from the general fund into capital projects as a way to keep our general fund amounts legally within the limits that the state code allows us. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so the state code, actually this year, it increased to 100% of your budget you're allowed to keep as a rainy day fund. But if you have in excess of that, you have to you have to move that into, and typically it's moved into the capital fund. So it's the long range rainy day fund, but you can't move it back from the capital fund to the general fund, or it's a bigger process to do that. You can allocate it to use it, but it's not meant to go back and forth.
All right, is there any further discussion?
Need a second on that.
I'll second it.
Great, thank you.
All right, so the question before us is Town of Alta Capital Projects Plan Fiscal Year 2022 proposed. That is before us today. All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
None opposed. Motion carries. All right, what's next? Let's see. I think we're done. Good meeting, everybody. Okay, thank you.
Good job.
No offense taken.
All right. This brings us back around to discussion and possible action to adopt business license ordinance.
Want me to give an overview of this step and what it's trying to accomplish?
Sure.
So what this ordinance does is several things, one of which is to adopt the study. And then it also provides ordinance language updates in, what did I say? It said Title 3, Title 3, Chapter 1. And it's, the way we want to think about this is similar to what you did in the parking study, where it's a framework, so that should you choose to later on in a fee structure charge those fees, you have the legal ability to do that. So those are the two key pieces. Polly, I don't know if you have anything to add, but those are the two key pieces to this ordinance as far as I'm
Can you put it up on your screen? Or
I would
can
be
someone share
happy
it?
to share it. I've got it. You bet. Let's make sure I just have the right one. There we go. Is there a specific section you want me to address?
No, it's just nice to have it up there while we're having a discussion.
Fair enough.
I move that the town council adopt ordinance 2021-06.
I will second.
All right, discussion, please.
Polly, were you going to say something before I asked for the ordinance to be put on the screen? I couldn't remember if you were reaching for your mute
No,
button.
I should have muted again. Jen explained it well. I didn't have anything to add.
I mean, the discussion, I guess, for me is that I feel that, as Jen said, that this is kind of the framework for going forward, that we have a study that is supportable. Zions has done many studies for us in the past, including a waste management study from 2012, where they looked at many components in the town, including recycling and potentially disproportionate costs there. But all of those things are aside from what this study went into. I don't see that there is, well, there may be a question of whether or not it should have included other things. I think the study itself is supportable as it is. I think the explanations that Ms. Becker gave us provided details that we didn't have before, although I had some of that from my conversations with Jen over the last months about all the details and backup that she had available and details that were available should I want that kind of detail. But I didn't feel that I needed it. So I feel that while there are many ways we could go with this, that the option A that was in the staff report of going with the base administrative costs, as Ms. Becker explained and as is in the report, for those businesses, those categories of businesses that are being charged in excess of what the state code would allow us to charge, is something that I think we need to take action on before the October council meeting, let alone the end of October, as Jen mentioned. And that for me, there are other things that I would like to consider in the future. For example, that maybe we want to include other categories. And I can see a justification for having a category for our medical clinic, like a hospital, that potentially should not be charged and lumped in with other businesses because of the benefit that it provides to the town. That I think is something we could recognize. So while there are other things, as I say, I think we could do and might be supportable, I think we should take action today. And I would go at least to option A, which is related to categories 1 and 8 being charged more than the base administrative cost, because I think that we are recognizing in-kind and other benefits that those businesses are giving to the town by not going to the maximum amount, but giving a substantial decrease, a 65% decrease from what the maximum allowable would be. And we recognize, of course, that there are sales tax revenues from other categories, likely retail, general services, restaurants, cafeteria, and bar, that are not being given a discount the same way that the categories 1 and 8 are.
All right. I want to share my opinion with you. First of all, Jim Clancy's work throughout this process, along with Piper, has been excellent, responsive, diligent. I had quite a few back and forth where I was trying to get information about what was supporting the report, ultimately from Zion's, and Jen was super responsive. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons, I'm not familiar with their schedule, but there certainly was some significant delay in receiving back the information from Zion's. And then when we did get the information back, it's simply repeated by copy and paste pretty much what was in the report. And so I have to tell you that the concerns that I've raised today are not new. I've been raising them for weeks or more, including at the last town council meeting. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a solid response from Zion's. I certainly don't envy the position of the Zion's representative who was here at the council meeting today to be put into the position of defending a colleague's work who's off on vacation, and you wouldn't be expected to be familiar with every bit of foundation. But again, assuming that the information that was forwarded to me came from Aaron Montgomery, I'm sorry to report to you that he was simply attempting to defend the report as it had been presented, rather than to answer the questions that I asked, which are the very same questions that I brought forward today. And so I'm sorry to say, I think this this report from Zions as it stands today is woefully inadequate. It doesn't address the proper allocation of overhead to the indirect costs in any way. If Zions had done dozens of these reports, then I assume they can provide me with a 10-page appendix that explains exactly how generally accepted accounting principles support the allocation of overhead that they have put in the report. There's nothing about that, nothing. So first of all, love to have an opinion on, to me, overhead is overhead. I would certainly invite the opinions of those who are wiser in the ways of accounting than I am. There are plenty of them. But from my point of view, all of the overhead that an organization incurs relates in a very, very tiny fraction to every single activity of that organization. It's true for the business that I work for, and it's true for the town of Alta. And that hasn't been addressed. But if that were the case, saying if it were the case, then it would support licensing fees of $128, which is a lot more reasonable than $62. I am sorry, but $62 is ridiculous, ridiculously low. Finally, with respect to what is claimed to be disproportionate service costs, enhanced service costs, again, I think those are a chimera. They are an illusion. There are no costs. You don't take your total costs and then say, well, here's something that happened, and so it represents 1% of that cost. No, the statute refers to costs. Costs are costs. Costs are money that you spend, not money that you go back and say, well, this is a percentage of my total budget, therefore it's a cost. No, show me a receipt, then you've got a cost that can potentially be recovered. And I would invite somebody to set the record straight on enhanced service costs and show me that there was actually billing for an additional town employee. Maybe that's the case. I'm not saying that it's not, but what I am saying is it's not in here. It's not in this report. And so there is nothing in the report that supports the additional business service costs. At this point, the report that's before us from Zions, in my humble opinion, has lost all credibility. That's not to say that it can't be corrected, shored up, fixed, the questions answered. Awesome, love to see it. We're just trying to get some work done here. But at this point, and certainly just to set the record straight, I would disagree strongly with a point of view that this little draft report is in some way a bell that can't be unrung. It can be unrung. I think it has been unrung. It's been showed to be fundamentally flawed. And so fortunately, we have until October 31st. We can get this right. I would invite that Zions goes back and completes the report with full information. Although I'll tell you, until somebody shows me receipts, money that's actually been spent I'm never going to agree with disproportionate service costs and enhanced service costs, because that's not how public safety works. Okay, public safety is the responsibility of the entire community. And now I'm going to tell you guys what I really think. I'm not holding back anymore. No, I'm just kidding. That's my take on the motion, the ordinance, and the report.
I guess I have a question for Polly. If for some reason we don't, we ask Zions to go back and redo something, or we ask it like the study get redone, are we allowed to just move forward with the fee structure that we have for this upcoming year? Because I know the end of October is getting close, and Zions Bank probably will need more time to do a study or redo their study. But I guess I'm just wondering, is now that we have this draft before us, is it possible to ask them to redo some things? And if we miss our October 31st deadline, does that impact us at all?
Yeah, I mean, there's no definites, right? And that's kind of what my email to you was trying to kind of weigh risks and ways moving forward. The study is a draft, so you have not adopted it yet. I think if you choose not to adopt it as it is, then you have kind of two routes. One is to just go with what we're calling option A, with the idea that that's the most recent evidence, and so you're going to base it on that. The other alternative would be to leave the rates as they are and recognize that there's some risk with that.
I'm going to just rudely jump in. If we leave the rates they are, they still would be based on the 2013 study, which was also done by Zions. So
right,
maybe less risk. I mean, I don't want to derail this whole process, but
Is maybe a question for me. I mean, this is, as Polly said, still a draft study. Are we talking about looking at a couple of areas, or are we talking about redoing the entire study? I mean, because they have a specific methodology they follow, but if you all think that they should revisit a certain section, that's certainly an option to do.
Well, let me suggest this. I think my objection to the disproportionate costs, that's more of a fundamental political and public safety objection. And you can agree with me or disagree, but I don't think it calls into question how Zions perform their work. I do think where I do call into question the completeness of the report is that some deep and serious thought needs to be made to the allocation of overhead, to indirect costs of licensing, and I'd like them to show their work. I'd like to see the backup. We've referred to generally accepted accounting principles, and I'd like to see how those are applied to the accounting of the indirect costs of licensing.
Councilman, I share your concerns and much of your critique about some of the results, given the report can only be as good as the data we're able to provide. And
yeah,
the data has been acknowledged to be weak in certain areas because we just haven't been collecting data that way, or we haven't had the tools. Yeah. And so I feel like the report, while I hope could be improved as a draft form based on some of your sharp critiques, I also feel is important to adopt at some point, because it, for all its flaws, also gives us a point at which to work forward from, to actually address equity in business licensing costs, and also to a point that I've brought up multiple times, the idea that there are externalities that businesses are benefiting from that allow their for-profit businesses to thrive that others are paying for. And I would have to say that public safety, which is north of, just when we talk about our police force, which is north of $1 million a year that we spend as a municipality, is something that I do not think is being equitably paid for throughout the community. And you and I might have sharp differences of opinion around that, but I do think adopting the business study and discussing those things are very important as legislators to have a means of laying the groundwork to move forward around what these fees should be.
Well, you raised some good points there. For starters, when we're looking at disproportionate costs, we're looking for our lost keys under the street lamp because the light's better there. We have tiny data, but I didn't even go into that because I object to the idea of special charges for public safety. I think it's a community responsibility. I'm also not going to get into the vast portion of the town's budget. Our for-profit businesses in town contribute through sales tax as well as property tax, but largely sales tax. I'm not going to get into that because what's before us is just business fees, which the Utah legislature has mandated are not a form of tax collection. They're purely to recover the town's cost of licensing. So that's mandated by the state of Utah. That's all that we can look at.
Maybe a couple of things. It is relatively common for municipalities to charge an additional fee for apartment buildings or things that do generate more service calls. So that is one thing that is pretty standard. And then going back to what Jen said, it's like when I listened to Susie from Zions talk about what they did as a basis for the study, they eliminated certain categories from the overhead. So I'm hoping that we can identify the categories they looked at, what they eliminated, what they included, and filling in some of the blanks. They could add back in those categories, Cliff, and then we could get to a more complete administrative overhead base.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I know I've taken more than my share, but I just have to point out, let's not fall for the red herring that says, well, we're double counting. That's easy to back out. If you take the direct costs and back them out of the overhead category that you're counting, that's easy to do. I added it up. My math sometimes could be wrong, but it was $5,900. So you just pull that out of the 500,000 of admin, and you've solved that problem. It's a tiny sliver. It's a rounding error, but once you fix that, there's no double counting going on.
So like you, Cliff, I am not an accountant, nor am I as good with budgets and numbers as you are. But it seems to me that for us to come up with a mechanism and a methodology for doing this, when we retained an expert and are seeking for them to provide additional information or comments about their methodology, is something that we should give them an opportunity to do. So what I would like to propose is that rather than push this off for a month to the October meeting, when Jen has already said that that is something that would not give staff sufficient time to be able to do what they need to do, that instead we seek additional input from Zions, hopefully in the next week or two at the most, and schedule another meeting for the town council to address this month in September.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Let's get this done. I certainly don't want to put last minute pressure on our town staff to get it done. Zions has to finish their homework. Fortunately, the report is still in draft form.
So I'd like us as a council then to state potentially, or in the next day, well, maybe today, to indicate our availability for a subsequent meeting, and potentially at that time, Harris is even able to attend, so that we can get this done.
Yeah, let's start by Jane, if I may ask you to do it, to be in touch with Zion and kind of define the scope and the time of the work to really address the overhead allocation issue of indirect costs. I think that's what comes down to from the standpoint of Zion's, figure out what they need. And then there's no point in trying to figure it out today, but if you'd like to give us a doodle poll when we could get together on a special meeting and ideally get this done.
Is that the only area of the report that anyone has concerns on or wants revisited after the communications that we've had back and forth with folks? Is that the outstanding issue, is overhead and indirect costs?
It is from my standpoint. It is from my standpoint.
I hear you loud and clear.
Yep. Well, but let me tell you one more thing. I know you've been dying to hear one more thing from me. You just can't wait. I know you're on the edge of your seat, but there is discretion and judgment that is applied to determining outcomes. And from my standpoint, it is entirely appropriate for our consultant to know the range of outcomes that we think is fair and for our community. And I'm certainly not shy to tell our consultant that I think $62 as a base licensing fee is ridiculously low. Now, maybe they come back and say, nope, this is a science. I've got it down to the penny. Here's your answer. Okay. But from my standpoint, it's entirely appropriate for them to know what we think is a reasonable range of outcomes. And I strongly disagree with any idea that has been put forward in this process that this in any way pollutes or taints the process, because I can assure you we are pure as the driven snow, and we all know how pure that is.
So I think we have a motion on the table. Do we need to fix that if we're going to postpone this?
Well, I think you should first vote on the motion on the table, and you can maybe see how that comes out. And then depending on how that comes out, you can do another motion.
All right, let's call the question. All those in favor say yes.
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 All those opposed say no.
No.
No. Motion fails.
So Jen, to speak to your point, I wonder if Zions could, and Marshall Morey could speak to disproportionate costs and how they came up with those figures. Maybe you and I have gone over this, but I think that in looking at that and how it's applied to other municipalities, it might be a fruitful discussion. So I wonder if they could do a little deeper dive on that. Thank you.
I mean, I'd be happy to give you the premise of how this is done. And so what you do is we refer to call data that was coded to a source, so a location. And then that location was run against Salt Lake County data to determine whether it was residential or not. The Altus or the dispatch office for the Alta Marshal's office has location codes. So it was those location codes that were looked at against the Salt Lake County data. And then what you do is you determine the average number, and Susie was kind of getting to this, you determine the average number of calls for residents, right? And so she was using let's assume it's 1, right? And then what the state law on disproportionate fees gives you the opportunity, should you choose to charge a disproportionate fee or an enhanced fee, it gives you that ability. It doesn't say that you have to. And so the reason that you may want to charge those fees is that if you had a community solely of residents in Alta, okay, and no businesses, you would have one level of public service. But when you bring in those businesses and you start looking at those disproportionate costs that are associated with those businesses, you can see the added costs for those services, and you can pass it forward to the businesses through the licensing fee. It gives you that ability and tells you what the maximum is that you can charge for those disproportionate fees. Does that help at all in framing why you might even want to charge a disproportionate fee? Oh, you're muted, Sheridan.
Thank you. I think it was useful to speak to Cliff, your point with regard to taxation and what these fees can be used for.
My struggle with the disproportionate fees is that, you know, when I worked in the ticket office over at Albion, there were people that would just come up to walk around. They weren't patrons of Alta ski area. They just came to park in that parking lot and they locked their keys in the car. So we called the marshals for them. But because they're at Albion Basin's parking lot at the ski area, that disproportionate fee is not a residential call. And so it's going to be coded to that business. Even though that person is not paid, you know, not a patron of the business, they came up here to see the sites, they came up here to drive through the town. So that's what's really hard for me about the disproportionate fees. And that's why I was asking about Mike Morey when we got our record keeping system in June, because I think that the data that Zion used is old and it's not as accurate. And so I was just suggesting that if we could have another fee, you know, study done in a couple of years, because I know there's a look back period. And it's the same with a business. You know, if somebody at the Alta Lodge, you know, is parked by the Alta Lodge, they aren't a patron of the Alta Lodge, but they lock their keys in the car and they've run into the lodge because it's the closest phone and the lodge makes the call. It's just really hard to try to give the lodge that fee for a call that our community is supposed to be providing to visitors and recreationists as part of a town. And so that's kind of where I agree with Cliff, is that some of that stuff is part of the community. I mean, the fact that we have a town, you know, it's similar to like the service that the ski bus service that we could probably have a better transportation service in town, but we don't. But it's part of a service that the town provides to be a town. And so that's just kind of where I'm at on the disproportionate fees. You know, like it's just a little tricky with how integrated our town is to try to say that something belongs to a business when we don't even know for sure if that person was a patron of the business or not. You know, things that are very specific to that business, like let's say there's a bar situation where somebody got drunk at that bar and the police got called. That is very specific in my mind. So that's just where I'm at on the disproportionate fees. And we can adopt this study when we get more information from Zion's Bank. And we have the ability to set the fee schedule. We don't have to do the maximum because that is based off of disproportionate fees. We can adjust that. And the last time we did something like this with Zion, I remember we did do that. So we just got to keep that in mind, that we as a council have the ability to adjust the fees regardless of how everyone feels about the disproportionate fees. But like Jen said, we can choose whether or not to pass that down to the business and the fee. for the disproportionate ones.
Yeah.
And Elise,
and,
just, oh, sorry.
just one more quick point about disproportionate fees. You know, if I'm trying to have a nice, quiet suburban lifestyle in New Orleans or in Las Vegas, it's understandable that the bars on Bourbon Street and the casinos on the Strip definitely generate disproportionate costs, no question. Maybe under those state laws, it could be reflected in their business licensing costs, depending on how the laws are written. That's not Alta. If we did not have a ski lift company, we did not have a ski lift business operating in Alta, none of us would live here. There'd be a couple of hermits and a couple of miners living in Alta. So let's not forget that.
So could we entertain a motion to continue this discussion on the business licenses for a date before the October town council meeting, preferably in September, once Zions has had an opportunity to respond to the two areas that have been raised today?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Polly, we don't need a motion for that, do we?
A motion to have another.
It doesn't do any harm. So we can do
Yeah, I
that,
think it
and
would
then
be,
we'll
and I
do
think it
a-
would be good
a
to
vote.
discuss when it is so that so that we can all try to schedule it.
I'm sorry, Polly, I didn't catch all of that.
I think it is, it makes sense to discuss this, to set a date now, if we can.
Well, I don't know if we're able to set a date today. Does it seem like it's a reasonable motion to get some information from Zions and make a doodle poll and then express our intention that we're all going to try to set a special meeting before the October meeting so we can get this done?
I'd suggest, knowing the mayor's schedule, the simplest option moving forward would be to get your feedback on whether Wednesday, September 29th could work, and we can try and move forward on that date.
Can we
What
vote
time
on
you-
that in a special session? Can we vote on this
Yes.
ordinance or amendment?
Yeah, you
Okay,
can
great.
vote on it in a special session.
What time were you thinking on the 29th, Jen?
I'd suggest 4 o'clock because it's the normal time, but if there's another time, 3 or 4 that works for you all, I don't see
Okay,
that
I'm
being a huge
available.
problem.
I can do that.
Tell me again, please, day and time.
September 29th at 4 p.m.
Yeah,
And so we'll make that official here quickly, but at least me just having the straw poll draw on whether that works for y'all is helpful.
yeah, that works for me too.
Elise?
Four works for me on the 29th.
And I assume also at that time, because we're not adopting the business license ordinance, the fee schedule that is the next agenda item could be addressed as
I
well.
was actually going to make a suggestion on that,
Okay.
if that's okay, when we get to that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so Polly, what's the right way for us to go forward? Should we have a motion on that or what should we do?
You can just continue this item to that date if we think that that's going to be the date.
Okay.
So
That's
I'll
fine.
check, I'll check with the mayor and then we'll officially schedule it and get it posted and everything, and try and give you guys some notice.
Okay, sounds good, thanks.
I would say it should be pretty clear within a week. And I think that gives Aaron ample time to get something that I can also submit to the council so that you guys can sit on it for a little bit.
Sounds good. All right. Then on discussion and possible action to adopt fee schedule resolution. Jen, you had a comment on that?
I was just going to say, I think it would be quite helpful for staff and to get it on the official books if we do the repeal and the replace on the fee schedule and we just leave out any adjustments to the business license fees for now. That we ignore, we can remove those edits to the fee
Okay.
schedule. And then we have something that is correct in place that fixes or updates the dog license amounts as well as the water fees.
And it simplifies the process for updating it next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I can pull that up if you want.
Yeah, that seems pretty non-controversial, and we should accommodate if that helps your process. Do you want to just walk us through?
How I would edit it. So I've got that document up in front of you, I think. So what I would do is update it to not include business license fees here. So it would just be water fees and dog licenses would be the rationale for repealing and replacing. We would remove this first whereas, the second whereas, the third whereas,
The fourth.
actually, let's see. Yeah, we're going. We actually everything from here. Oh, I am allowed to highlight. There we go. So all of these in purple would be removed. Oops, except for the top description. And we would start, and it would just be the whereas the town council adopted resolution 2021 R6 updating its dog fees and 2021 R13 for the water rates. So this would be the start of the document here on the whereas. There would just be those three whereases. And then I will remove the section 1 that points to the fee schedule that, or no, we still need that, excuse me. We still need that. That's
Keep
effective.
both of those.
Yeah, we still need both of those. And then when we get down into the fee schedule here, everything will be as it was presented to you in the draft, except for we will not make edits to this section here on businesses and license fees. These all stay as is. The old numbers here that are crossed out will still be valid in that document.
And the title to the resolution to remove it.
Correct. Yeah, that was the first thing. Yeah. That would remove the, it won't have this text right here, business license fees.
I move that we adopt resolution number 2021 R15 with the edits that Jen has suggested.
I will second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
None
Yes.
opposed? Motion passes. All right, terrific. Is there any new business today?
Just to circle back about something that I've touched on a couple council meetings ago, asking for the cost of what it would take to bring back some of the elements of the town park that we've had in the past. I think there were insurance concerns and other things. I just never heard back about that.
Ooh, that's because I didn't do anything about that yet. But
No.
good thing, that's one. So that would be like number 21. That's how things, when we're talking back and forth, that's how they get onto the capital projects list, if it's big enough for a capital project. And then, so we're looking at swings, slide, and then I had written a note saying, call me if you can think of anything else, but it's on the list now.
Thank
So,
you.
All right. Thank you for your patience. We'll get on that.
No worries.
Yeah, and John, that wouldn't be just the, it wouldn't be just the equipment, it'd also be to change the layout of the space surrounding those pieces of equipment.
Insurance, right?
Because of insurance, yeah. Well, because of codes, safety codes for playgrounds, I think.
Okay.
It's a building thing.
All right.
All right. Any other new business today? Not hearing any. Thank you all so much for your excellent and diligent work
Do you want a
today.
motion to adjourn, Cliff?
You have to give me a chance to ask for that, Piper.
I'm sorry.
Is there a, although, I don't blame you for putting some guardrails on me. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Stand adjourned. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Good
you.
job, Cliff.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you.